and an incentive payment to Smith & Edwards. Details are listed in the packet. Just turn it over to you if there are any questions regarding those details.
Question from the board? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing for item 2A. If you're here to speak on this item, now is the opportunity. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing for item 2A and return to the board. Board Member McConaughey.
Thank you, Chair. I move to approve Resolution 204.
Second.
We have a motion by Board Member McConaughey, a second by Board Member Nichols. Discussion to the motion? Seeing none, let's vote.
Board Member Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Jacob?
Yes.
Chair Rolfe?
Yes.
Board Member Nichols?
Yes.
Board Member Burton?
Yes.
Board Member Newton?
Yes.
Board Member McConaughey?
Aye.
The vote passes 7 in favor.
We need a motion to adjourn the redevelopment agency meeting and reconvene the city council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Jacob and a second by Board Member Jacob and a second by Board Member McConaughey. Discussion of the motion. All in favor? Aye. I call the December 6, 2017 City Council meeting back to order. We've just been in a closed session in the administrative conference room. The first item will be the pledge. Tonight that will be led by Damian Wellman from Troop 1032. Damian.
All rise. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you very much, Damian. Communications, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, guests, visitors. I'd like to invite everyone here to participate this coming Tuesday in City Park. We're going to have a Hollywood company, I can't tell you who, coming to celebrate and participate in a parade that will circle the entire park. It's going to be filmed. The participation will include perhaps some donuts and hot chocolate. The program that is being recorded has about 85 million viewers, and according to them. And there's a flyer about it up on the podium. I'm going to hand approximately 100 additional flyers to council members. Additionally, information related to the event will be on our Facebook post tonight. And I wish I could tell you about who the celebrity person that's coming, but it's a worthy reason to show up in the city park if you can make it next Tuesday. Thank you, City Council, Mayor.
City Attorney.
Nothing tonight.
Scott.
Mayor, Council, I don't have anything this evening. Thank you.
Brian Clegg.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one item. This Friday at 2 p.m., we've been asked from the State Forester's Office to host six delegates from Hubei province in China. These folks will be representing the forestry department, and they're coming here to talk to us about how we manage and run our forestry department. And then we'll be taking them on a field trip of different projects we've completed, and then doing a tour of the Conservancy gardens. If you folks are interested in joining us, just let me know so we can figure out transportation. It'll start at 2 at the parks offices, and then end about 4 o'clock. So let me know if you folks are interested, and we'll go from there. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thanks.
Wendell?
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Chief McElraith?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I want to update you. Situation's changing pretty rapidly, but today, late last night actually, California requested from the state of Utah, as part of 50 strike teams, a strike team is made up of 6 fire engines, to go to California to assist in those wildfires that they're currently experiencing. I think Mr. Bricky updated you this evening. Since that time, it's changed in that we will be still supporting that request. We'll be sending 1 engine and 6 firefighters. This will be very similar. It is not the exact same thing we participated in October. There'll be quite a contingent that will leave from Provo. Will be the rally point tomorrow morning. They'll get on the road about 8 o'clock and get down there to assist them. They're estimating 70-mile-per-hour winds in California tomorrow. And if you've seen the fire coverage they have, they've got a real dangerous situation. So good that we could come help. They asked 8 western states. Utah was one of the first that was able to commit a number of resources to send to them. So thank you for your support, and know that we'll have 6 firefighters there plus a fire engine. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Shepherd?
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you, Mayor. This is my 25th meeting since being a part. This is the first full meeting a year later from when I was appointed, and it's been a wonderful year. I want to specifically thank Parks for the modifications and improvements at Sunset Cove Park on New Bingham Highway and 4800 West. They've been working at it for a little bit, and it's a great addition. I also want to thank our Public Works Department for installing some yield signs on Old Bingham Highway by the railroad track that feeds into SME Steel. That's been needed, and I just appreciate Wendell and his team who've been able to accomplish that. And then I also was able to participate this week in a breakfast at the Transjordan landfill, which is the solid waste landfill that our city participates in, and I had a wonderful time there learning about the processes that they use there and how it benefits our city and our residents. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob?
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to be back. Appreciate the council's indulgence for the month of November. Once every 7 years, my 2 family birthdays will line up on an election night, anyway, and a city council night. So just happened to work out that way this time, and I appreciate the indulgence. Couple of things. First, to the firefighters that are going to be going down to California, Godspeed and do good work. One of the towns that is being endangered is where I grew up. Spent a lot of years of roaming those hills that are now on fire. So, yeah, go take good care of them. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the technology is in place now in this room to stream our meetings. They are good to go as far as technology is concerned. I would like to give our staff direction, if there's no objections, to make that happen. Whatever legally needs to fall into place, if there's a resolution that we need to pass or anything like that, that's just something. There's myriad government entities do this. It shouldn't be that hard. So I think we may be able to take steps to get that done sooner than later. And then lastly, I'm having a thought, and I've received a lot of input from a lot of residents on bringing the budget committee back and separating that out from the sustainability committee that was combined about 5 years ago. received a lot of input on that. If I'm going to work up a little resolution on that, on how we can do that. If you have strong feelings one way or the other, please email me. Residents and council alike, let me know your thoughts, and we'll try to get it all worked into the conversation so that we can get something put together that everybody agrees with. But I just think having more eyes on the city budget, especially the residents whose money this is that we spend, is a good idea. Thank you.
Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. I'll be brief and say I don't have anything to add at this point. Thank you.
Councilmember Newton.
Most of the council knows I've been working on the impact fee study that was started back in August. I've been working with Steve Glane and Wendell and Dave Murphy, and we have resolved most of the issues that I had now. I have one more that I talked with Wendell tonight, and hopefully we'll get an answer there and have it ready for the 20th. But I think we're getting much closer than we were a month ago. So thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I recognize we have some Boy Scouts out here, so thank you, Scouts, for coming. And I also want to recognize that one of those troops is my own neighborhood troop, so it's good to see you guys here. Special welcome to you guys. Since our last meeting, I joined with the fire department and participated in their CERT training. And the fire department did such a good job, I actually passed, and I am now certified. So thank you. And my compliments and to the fire department stepping forward to go out and help California. Thank you for doing that as well. And the Parks Department, thank you for doing that work on 40th West, on your beautification jobs over there. We're looking forward to seeing it through completion. And when you're ready for volunteers, we have a whole bunch of scouts over there that would love to help. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I would add at this point is in response to Councilmember Jacobs' comment about being able to stream meetings. I know we've had conversations with the City Attorney's Office about needing to have a policy in place before we do that. So I would suggest that might be a good topic of conversation for strategic planning this coming January. That's all I have at this point. Thank you, Mayor.
I just had one comment before we go to the citizens' comments. I've had numerous complaints about 70th South, the quality of the asphalt on the project at 70th South. But I would like to give a thank you, and I'd like to make sure it gets passed on to the crew of our West Jordan asphalt crew that redid the patchwork where 2A and 2B go together. It's about 1,000 foot. In my opinion, that's probably the smoothest part of the entire road. And just let the citizens know that we're working on the rest. We'll now open the citizens' comments. I have several signed up to speak. Edward Frotton.
Thank you. I'm Ed Frotton. I actually live in South Jordan, but have my place of business here in West Jordan. Next to Historical Arts and Castings, we too are probably the businesses most affected by this application. I don't know if each of you got one of these handouts that I brought in, but it illustrates a few points. Where the Westridge Academy has established itself is the perfect buffer between residential and heavy industrial, and I think I'm opposed to the zoning change that's been proposed because I think it defeats the West Jordan's master plan and zoning ordinance. And I understand the new property owner has a problem, developing. My preference would be to keep the zoning the same and put something in that is PF zoning that would could still maintain that open space and perhaps utilize some of those features a little better. For example, the ball diamond that's there, it'd be nice to say that. So what I did is I put together what I thought might be an alternate proposal, and it's more like a planned unit development. I suggested maybe if you wanted to trade off some of the densities, put a road in off Bagley Park Road that on the second illustration that I've put in there, it shows that road feeding in from an industrial park into a residential area. And that part to the west is putting high-density residential right into the middle of what should be maintained as manufacturing, M1 zoning. So one of the suggestions I thought and suggested it to the property owner is from the east, if he could come in from that other subdivision with the road that connects through to 90th, that would fulfill the rule that the city has for having ingress and egress. And I would suggest that a little trade-off on 90th South. For example, if you put a condominium business complex in there for, say, a dental facility or a medical facility or office space where you enter off 90th South, that would be a good way to join the high-density residential on the west to the residential on the east and the church that's in the middle. So I just think putting a plan together that utilizes the features to the best advantage for the city, for the property owner, and for those of us who have a vested interest in the industrial park. I'm a sculptor by profession, right next door to that manufacturer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Corbin England?
This is my fourth time coming. I'm just imploring you guys to listen to the Planning Commission. They did their due diligence, go with their recommendation, which is a denial of this. They've been asked time and time again to amend their application, make it more enticing. For some reason, there's a refusal on their end to do that. Just today, I've been on the phone with the Division of Air Quality from the county and the state, trying to deal with the Dannon issue and the smell that comes off of there. And there's not a lot we can do about that, but it all stems back to the zoning in that area. And you've allowed residential areas to encroach on industrial areas, and this is just another prime example of another reason why to deny this application. And that's about all I have to say, otherwise I'd be repeating myself. You guys have heard everything else. Respectfully ask you guys to deny this change in zoning.
Thank you. Richard Baird?
In response to the zoning change, Historical Arts and Castings that owns the property directly east of the access road that's requested is opposed to this change. But we realize that there needs to be something done so the north piece of property can be used. There is approximately a 3-acre parcel of property, including the road, between us and the West Ridge Academy that jogs into M1 and PF zoning if this is changed. There should be a distinct line of demarcation for boundary lines because you have heavy manufacturing and now you're bringing residential into that piece of property. We feel that a portion of this property should not be able to be changed. We also feel that the access road also should not be allowed. We feel that the allowed access road presents an incredible liability to the city of West Jordan, allowing parents and their children to have direct access onto this M1 zoning. I do not believe that there is any other facility or other residential that actually accesses into an M1 zone. So I don't know why we're going to allow that at this point. When we purchased our property in West Jordan, specifically in Bagley Industrial Park, we were promised by the city that there would be no encroachment of the residential use. Because of our manufacturing process, namely our foundry, we wanted a location where the smell that comes from our process of what we do not affect any of the properties around us. The last thing that we wanted were properties surrounding us to request us to move because they did not like the smell. When we were building, we were promised a 1-mile buffer when we purchased the property, and there was a zoning map that had a 1-mile buffer that had mixed-use zoning and not residential. So I don't know at what point that changed, but I know 5 years ago that when this residential high-density complex, we again really had an issue with that because that fronts our piece of property that we purchased and developed thinking that we were not going to have this encroachment. We have made considerable investment in developing our business and have paid our taxes for 26 years, helping West Jordan to improve and to grow. Where we are now, I don't know. And it just seems that West Jordan is not keeping the promises to landowners and purchasers of industrial property that they made 25 years ago. And it sounds ridiculous to me that there would be a change in that. So I'm opposed to this.
Thank you. Alexandra Efremel.
Mayor and Council, can we please wait 1 minute, and we want to count all our blessings for 60 seconds, please. I thank you. I can't imagine 24 hours a day and we can't be appreciative at least 60 seconds for all the blessings we have in life. We just don't take time out. But anyway, I want to say thank you a million times, a million, Mayor Rolfe. You have been the most incredible man in the last 14 years of this city. You were on the council, and the last 4 years, I know for a fact, you did not work 40 hours a week. You worked many weeks for 80 hours a week. And I just cannot thank you enough. And believe me, I will miss you so much. God has been with you, and all the people that did vote for you, they love you, and we don't know why the election turned out as it is. We have an evil man that's going to come into this city.
I'm going to ask that any kind of reference to
excuse me,
is not appropriate.
Mr. Riding, I called the truth. I called Riding, and I told him, why did you put your campaign signs on West Jordan property? He hung up on me. That's the truth. I also, he included a man from Jordan saying that I had stolen his 2 signs. This is the truth. He called the police department. The police department called me. He is unethical, and I will say that forever. And don't stop me from saying he's evil, because he is evil.
Mayor, point of order. I'm fine with her stating all these facts, but when she does a personal attack, that's crossing the line.
It's not personal. This is the truth. I am not lying. Call the police department. I love you, Mayor Rolfe. A million thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else wishing to speak during citizen comments? Now is the opportunity. Please, for the record, state your name and address.
My name is Stephen Pack, and I live at 9183 Mountain Iris Way. I'm a state delegate for our local precinct, a veteran, left the Cold War as the Berlin Wall came down. My wife's from Laos, and so she's really happy to own property in our great country. I've worked for built a lot of good software for our state, Browse, Health Equity, worked for Unified Fire Authority, Geico, and Microsoft. I'm against this rezoning to a R18E. It's very bad for the property worth, and it doesn't fit, and it's destructive to our community's financial worth. If we rezone it to R110D, that does not fit because the industry in the area and apartments would, if it was zoned to apartments, would swamp 9,000 traffic as well and lower our property values. The local industry and the city, as I understand, have had this buffer zone in place for some time, and if you haven't experienced the noise and smells and such over there, you wouldn't understand. But the industry noises and 24/7 operations and stuff, housing turnover would rise and our property would fall. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak during citizen comments?
Steve Jones, 3234 West, 6920 South. Working in industrial complexes, I see this kind of issue all the time. You know, these guys go and they build their businesses and they put them out and away from people, and slowly the city grows. Your guys' job is to make sure that those buffers remain in place. The public's memory is very, very short, and they build houses over there, or they build condos, or whatever they're going to build, and then they forget that there was a buffer zone in there and it was put in there for a place. We're always trying to find businesses to stay in West Jordan, and we give all these tax breaks and we do all these jumping through hoops, but yet when we have businesses here, we seem to want to drive them out. I would hope that you guys would support them, and you know, a lot of this stuff is well known to these developers. They can find some other uses for it. It's you know, rather than something that may be easier for them to sell off and then walk away from. We see all kinds of this stuff in North Salt Lake where hillsides are sliding and whatnot because somebody didn't do their due diligence. The other thing I'd like to talk about too is 70th South. You know, I hate to climb on that dog pile, but you get in my 3/4 ton truck and drive down that road right now, and I can tell you exactly where every single manhole is. I've never seen such a poor installation of, you know, half an inch. I don't know what they were saving in concrete or what it is, but I guarantee I find every single one of them, and every time I do, I just think, this is what we paid for, this is what we waited that long for. It just seems to me that that would be something that we could reject for improper installation. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will close citizens' comment. Oh, sorry.
Good evening. Thank you for what you do. Sean Mitchell. I own the property which is called Mitchell Place, a subdivision that's been proposed right next to Westridge Academy. Couple things. While we've tried to accommodate our neighbors' needs, we have so many different kinds of neighbors. They have their apartment houses to the west, there's R110 to the east, a church to the north, R18 to the north, the Foundry to the southwest, and Westridge, which has families and youth in conflict right next to us. And so we've tried to come up with something that is fair and reasonable for that particular area. We're literally almost 100 yards away from the industrial park. So while the references keep being made that we're part of the industrial park, in essence, we're to the north of the industrial park. We've done traffic studies, which I think I sent you a copy of, which seem to have a very minimal effect and impact on the neighborhood. The traffic study shows 60 cars coming and going in the morning, about 80 in the peak hours of the evening, and with 90% of those cars going off to 90th South and only 10% going to Bagley Park Industrial Park. The problem here is most people don't want change. Change brings in some things that are uncertain, and as a result, the issues really are the neighbors to the east. Their view is going to be blocked, and they don't like that, and I can't change that. The neighbor to that owns the foundry, fine people, but the reality is they own some additional ground, which at one point they're going to try to develop, and additional housing may be a conflict to that. So with that being said, I thank you, and we request your approval of this particular project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Council members, thank you for allowing us some time, and thank you for telling us and reminding us what's really important. We live in a great land. We live in a blessed environment, so thank you. I wanted to make one comment. It was mentioned that it might be better to put a storage unit somewhere here or an R110 somewhere there, referencing my name is Ole Mitchell, 11160 South Susan Drive. Thank you. One of the things we're looking at, if we had a larger piece of land, 50 acres plus, it would qualify under what they call the MPC zone, and we could do some multiple things, R16 on the west side and R110 on the other side, and storage units on the back, and you could create a buffer and do things that would create maybe keeping more people happy. As we looked at this, the R18E, which builds nice homes, which is substantial lots in today's market, we felt like would be a compromise from the high density to the lower density. That is a medium density project we felt like would be a fair compromise with everything that's in the neighborhood. We thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll close the citizen comments and move to the consent agenda. I've been asked to pull consent item 6C. Councilmember McConaughey.
Move to approve all consent items except C.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember McConaughey, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion? See none. Let's vote.
Councilmember Newton.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols.
Yes.
Mayor Rolfe.
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Consent item 6C. David Newton. Councilmember Newton.
Thank you, Mayor. This resolution is about changing the layout on New Bingham Highway where it joins 7800 South. And I hadn't seen this before this week. I'm concerned that pulling all the traffic into a right turn into 78 South may not be the best solution here. And I don't know if the council has talked about this before. Like I said, I hadn't seen it, but I think there ought to be some more discussion regarding that.
Just a little history. We had public hearings on it at 3 different occasions, and the engineers were there to answer questions from the public. And so just so you know that that's the history of this particular item. Councilmember Newton.
I would suggest that we table this until next year when the new council can take a look at it and maybe take a look at it again. I would make that motion.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Second for conversation.
We have a motion by Councilmember Newton, a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is one that we've had a lot of frustration with. We've had a lot of conversation about what can we do with eastbound, westbound traffic, especially on 7800 South. And we went through some significant steps to do I can't remember the official name, but the property swap with UDOT to give them 90th and we take 78th. We've been working with the FAA, with UDOT, everybody trying to add the ability for eastbound and westbound traffic on 78 just south of the airport. I know there's some deficiencies with what's well, there's significant deficiencies with what's out there now. But as we looked at this one seemed to be the best of the options that were out there. I would be curious if there are other ideas or thoughts that were out there that you wanted to share, or any other insight that might be available.
Yeah, sorry. I don't have any other options at this point. Yeah, it's not totally working the way it is, but it's not totally bad either. And I just see all that traffic coming down New Bingham Highway and coming to a stop and turning there, unless there's something that's going to create.
It's actually not a stop.
It doesn't stop?
Yes.
Okay. And then does it continue separate till it reaches further down? Till it reaches 40th West? Do we know? Sorry.
Councilmember McConaughey.
I really wish there was a way that the mayor could override the order in which people's mics have popped up. No, so on this, it's not terribly visible here, but there's a separate right lane that's added on for the folks who, I wish there was a way we could also share this on the screen too, so the folks in the audience could see. But there's a separate...
It's a dedicated lane.
Yes, separate dedicated lane that goes all the way to 40th. And then that dedicated lane branches off over by the soccer complex or the Public Works building, so that should help alleviate some traffic issues there. There are also 2 left turn lanes that are going to be going into Jordan Landing that are included with this. And the length of those lanes is, I want to say, double or almost triple what it is today, but it adds a significant capacity to the folks who are turning north off of 78th into Jordan Landing. We think this will help with a lot of the issues especially for the eastbound traffic. You'll still have a fair amount of traffic coming off of New Bingham, but then you'll also have folks on 78th who aren't forced to go down to New Bingham and then make that left turn and join and then come back over. So hopefully that helps a little bit. It seemed like everybody wanted to chime in, so I'll give up the floor to anyone who wants to add some more color and insight.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Newton, I'm going to echo exactly what Councilmember McConaughey said, which pretty much took what I was going to say. Just to sum up very quickly, it's a non-stoppable right turn, 2 left turns into Jordan Landing, which will alleviate the backup. There's several times where New Bingham is backed up from 40th West. They're going into Jordan Landing all the way back to Airport Road or even beyond that. Airport Road. The other thing is the priority for New Bingham Highway kind of got severed when Mountain View Corridor went in, and they stopped New Bingham at 5600 West. And so now there's, I suppose, less traffic on New Bingham than when it went all the way through. And so there's kind of a less priority, and maybe this isn't the perfect, but the culmination of all these pieces, this seems to be a reasonable solution. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. I won't add anything that's been said other than, well, I'm not going to regurgitate what's been said. I agree with what's been said. I will add to it that I'll be speaking against the motion only in that this has been in the works at least 8 years. I've been on the council, at least in discussion point, this is, to delay it another month seems pointless at this point. I'm ready to move forward.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Newton, I can see where you're coming from, and it seems to me, as we look at this, is you take the road this on there, up there now, you take 78th and just keep on going. Since east-west traffic is our concern, it seems to me if we're coming down and making a right-hand turn and going there, even though they don't have to stop, we're going to be slowing down that east-west traffic dramatically, making that turn right through there. So could we keep New Bingham with that slope going through there to keep that flow going? Maybe not, I don't know. And then still have that strong turn for those who are going on the other direction and make a left-hand turn and go back the other way. But I'm only an electrician, I'm not a traffic engineer.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also against the motion to table. I think the proposal is a good one, and as somebody who every time I have to go anywhere within West Jordan has to make the right turn onto Airport Road and then the left turn onto New Bingham in order to merge back onto 78th that I had just left, I'm very much looking forward to bidirectional traffic on 78th. Also, the Mountain View Corridor having the intersection at 78th and not New Bingham has an intersection at 78th and at 90th. 78th is the priority road now. New Bingham is going to be is to be de-emphasized for that reason as well. And that's just one more reason that it needs the bidirectional traffic past the airport. And so I'm in favor of the proposal, opposed to the motion to table.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Two quick items. First, to Councilmember Burton, I believe we had some conversation about this part previously. Well, I don't know if it was as a council. I just remember being in a forum where we discussed it. And one of the concerns that was brought up was the proximity of the merge to the left turn into Jordan Landing and making sure that there's plenty of time for people to get over to make that turn so you don't have people cutting across multiple lanes of traffic. The second item I was going to point out is we do have our traffic engineer here as well. So if there are additional questions that need to be directed to an expert, we could probably put him on the spot. Or I would ask if the council would like to invite him to add any insight on top of what we've already shared. If there would be any opposition to requesting him to add any insights or hit on any points we might not have shared.
Councilmember Newton.
I can count to 4. I'll withdraw my motion.
Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you, Councilmember Newton. I move to approve 6C.
Second. We have a motion by Councilmember Nichols, a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion to the motion. I would just like to state that we were promised at strategic plan back in January that this project would be absolutely bid out in September of 17. And it still isn't bid out. The citizens out there have been waiting a long time for this bottleneck. And if this helps spur it on, that would be wonderful. Let's vote.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Newton?
Thanks for the information and the discussion, and I'll vote yes.
Mayor Ralph?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols?
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Public hearing item 7A, receive public input and consider for approval ordinance 17-64 regarding a rezone of 5.01 acres from R18E, single-family residential square foot lot, 8,000 square foot lot, to R16E, single-family residential 6,000 square foot lot zone for property located at 8174 South, 6540 West, Lone View West Subdivision, Peterson Development, LLC. Justin Peterson, applicant. Scott?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll turn the time over to Larry Gardner. He'll go over a summary of the unique request.
Larry?
What I passed out was the narrative that Peterson prepared back in October. It was omitted from the staff report, and so there was a page holder in your staff report that said there was a narrative, but it actually was not in the staff report. Peterson Development purchased this site approximately a year and a half ago and rezoned it from agricultural to R18E a little over a year ago. They have gone through the subdivision, received preliminary and final subdivision approval for this site. The site is long and narrow, and so what has resulted is a development where the lots are adequate in width, but in depth they tend to be a little constrained. And so Peterson has requested a rezone from R18 to an R16 in order to have 10-foot less of setbacks between the front and the rear to allow for a larger home, the E-size home on the property. And as you can see in their narrative, it says a greater selection of homes for the home builder that they're planning to sell it to. As you can see in the first paragraph, the first paragraph of their narrative, they do not plan on changing this subdivision plat that has received final approval. All they want is a change in zoning, and so staff could administer less setbacks to allow for the larger E-size homes on these lots. So there will be no change in density. The lot sizes will be the same as what was approved with the subdivision plat. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions? Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question. If they did want to redo the subdivision plan and come in with 6,000 square foot lots, would that have to come back to the council, or would that go to the planning commission?
Planning commission.
What would the planning commission would have to approve that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Larry. I'll now open the public hearing for item 7A. If you're here to speak on this item, now is the opportunity. Please.
Alexandra Efremo, 3735 Judge Circle. I am against us lowering the R1-8E 8,000 square foot lots down to 6,000. I don't understand that explanation the previous individual gave, because I don't know how anybody can say, if you're requesting to lower the square footage from 8,000 to 6,000. 6,000 is a lot less, and a lot smaller, and I'm against it. I feel that we should retain the 8,000 square feet and do not lower it to 6,000. I'm against high density. I always have been. Every little foot, in my opinion, is very relevant. So I don't understand him saying that there's not going to be anything different going on, but I don't know. I can read, if you say to change 8,000 square feet to R-1-6E to 6,000 square feet, I think that means you're doing it a little bit less. Anyway, I'm against this. It should stay at 8,000 square feet and not 6,000 square feet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor and members of the council, my name is Warren Kirk. I work with Peterson Development. For clarification, we have spent a lot of money already substantiating the improvements that are in this. We are ready to dedicate this plat. We have no intention in doing anything other than changing the zoning so that the street that this subdivision sits on is consistent with the other homes that are built that are part of the Highlands. So as you drive down the street, the setbacks for these homes will be consistent with the setbacks that are already in place. As Larry explained to you, we purchased this property recently. The Highlands Master Plan was already in process. It was an oversight that it was zoned R18. We would respectfully request that you see the reason for the rezone so that we can actually just build a better home, a bigger product, and consistent with the overall neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will close the public hearing for item 7A and return to the council. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. This reminds me of similar action that was taken, gosh, it's got to be 5 years ago, probably almost to the day, that there was an R1, I think it was an R110, that the developer came back and asked for an R18 for the very reason was for setbacks. And it was over butted up against Bacchus Highway. It's southwest of Sunset Ridge Middle School. And at that point, I remember a lot of discussion on the council. I wasn't on the council. I was at the meeting. And there's a lot of discussion about, well, what do we do if the developer decides to sell and before a home is built and somebody else comes in and wants to build? Well, now they have 6,000 square foot zoning. They could file an amended subdivision plat and get their 6,000 square feet. That didn't happen at that point. I believe that home builder, I don't remember what the home builder was, but that home builder went ahead as they promised with the subdivision plat that they had already filed and kept their 8,000 square foot lots or 10,000 square foot lots, whatever it was, and just was able to put the product they wanted to on those smaller lots because of the setbacks. So I don't know if it's possible, but I'd like to ask either legal or planning if it's possible to put it in as a condition that we can approve this, but if there's an amended subdivision plat, that has to come to the council. I don't think there will be one, but if there is an amended subdivision plat, that would have to come to the council for approval. Can that be amended into the ordinance one way or the other? We used to do that on the planning commission all the time. We throw conditions of approval into things. So.
Sure. Let me start, and they can probably clean up my mess. But I have to pull up the section. There is a section in Title 13 of our zoning ordinance that specifically says that that does not allow us to attach zoning conditions to rezoning applications. I can pull that specific section out if you give me a minute. That's okay. But I read that last week because that comes up over and over, and so that's my part. I don't know if the attorney's office wants to chime in too.
I think we'd have to follow our code. That's my recommendation and suggestion. It's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to recollect. I thought that we had a similar situation not long ago where we made the zoning time sensitive, and if the construction hadn't started by a certain point in time, it reverted back to what the zoning was previously. I think this was probably only within the last 3 or 4 months. Is that an approach that could be followed? This time, was it Scott or David?
We did do that, and I did step back and just make sure that the applicant was okay with that. I mean, we can step back and visit with Mr. Kirk real quick and find out if he has any objection. My thought would be he came here with a particular project in mind. We're modifying it in a way that he may not be authorized to do so. Do you mind if, and authorize it, but do you mind if we just step back and ask him real quick?
So before making the motion for a 5-minute recess, I'll just let you know that my thought process was to ask how long they anticipated till the project would start, and then perhaps adding 6 to 12 months on top of that as part of the approval.
So the project's going to start anytime. I mean, they've constructed warranty on it. they've received final subdivision approval. It's been signed. They're just happening. Peterson is one of the groups that,
We'll be dedicating this in 2 weeks. We have sidewalk, we have curb gutter, we have asphalt. We're even trying to do landscape in the park strips. So if that's what you want, I'm going to go out on a limb right now and just say we need less than 3 months to record this, and it is a done deal.
So if we were to throw out December 31st, 2018.
That's plenty of time. The city will have it here shortly, right, Brian? Anyway, yeah, we're so far along, this ship is gone. We're not going to tear up asphalt. We're not going to put a new sewer. We're not going to contact the power company. We're down the road.
All right. Thank you. So it sounds like the safety may not be needed, but I'd still be inclined to add it just in case, even if it is a little overkill. But I'll return the floor. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
I would agree that the safety is not needed since they're that far down the road, and I'm not concerned about it. So I'm going to make a motion based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanations received today. I move that the City Council approve Ordinance 17-64.
Mayor, might I also add, including those statements made by the applicant at the podium, incorporating into the motion?
I didn't. I don't think it's necessary, but I would not be opposed to it. So under the advice of Mr. Bricky, I would add the comments included that the applicant will do it by the time frame stated.
If acceptable, yes. To a second.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion to the motion. Just before we vote, I'd like to point out that the lots that have been built here, the sewer, water, power has been stepped to, are larger than the lots that surround this particular subdivision at 8,889 square feet average, I guess. Let's vote.
Mayor Ralph,
Yes.
Councilmember Newton,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Item 7B. This was scheduled as a public hearing item and has been canceled.
If I may, Mayor, it was, may I?
Yes.
Thank you. It is canceled on our agenda. However, it was put out to the public as a public hearing and was not canceled to the public as a public hearing. And I expect there may be 1 or 2 individuals here who came prepared to speak to this. So I would like to keep that as a public hearing and give them the opportunity to speak at the proper time.
Okay. Item 7B, public hearing item. Receive public input and consider amending the 2009 West Jordan Municipal Code, Title 13, Zoning Regulations, Chapter 2, regarding cap and grade, City of West Jordan applicant. Scott Langford.
Thanks, Mayor. Members of the council, to add to Councilman Burton's introduction, just for clarity, even if we hold public comment today, there is not an ordinance prepared for any changes. Instead, you'll see a resolution in your packet, and it will need a vote to move forward. But the resolution is to direct staff and the Planning Commission to prepare an amendment via ordinance, and the proper process to amend anything in Title 13, which this cap and grade ordinance is found, is to first go to the Planning Commission, have a public hearing at the Planning Commission, and then bring it back to the council in additional public hearing for final decision. So with that, many of you are familiar with the cap and grade ordinance. It's been kicking around since 2014, It's had several amendments over the years. It has a lot of different nuances to it, but the short of it is that the proposal that I guess is on the table for discussion tonight is whether or not to add an additional exception which would exempt twin homes from that cap and grade. And Councilman Burton, you probably have more to add, but that's all I have for my report.
Councilmember Burton?
Thank you, Mayor. There is a little bit more I'd like to add. What brought this to light, if I may, there was a constituent within our district who said he had an issue and brought this to my attention, and I thought, that's not a big deal, we can take care of that because we have that exemption in our cap and grade. So I told him I'd be happy to help him work his way through that and get there. Unknown to myself that exemption that was in the cap and grade had been removed at a previous time that I was not aware of. So when he came and met with me, I told him that had been removed, so we may have to find a different way to do it. But either way, I felt that exception should still be in there. So whether it mattered to him or not, I was going to, whether he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity or not, I was going to go forward and put this exception back in our cap and grade. And he may want to use this and he may not want to use that. But I wanted to put this in there whether he did or not. A little personal history on this for myself. My son bought a duplex in Provo, and he was fortunate to live in one side and rent out the other side, which helped cover his payments while he was living in that duplex. And when he finished living in that duplex, he sold it and somebody else bought it. And each time it was sold, that buyer had to sign a paper that he would live in one side of it, and the city of Provo monitored that and made sure that happened. And I saw how that kept that duplex better because the owner was living there. So my idea is if we have a duplex in the city and the owner is required to live in one side, then the landlord is not absent. He's right there and sees that it's getting taken care of and gets taken care of very well. As I researched the history on this, when the cap and grade very first came out, before the cap and grade came out, we had temporarily stopped all multifamily housing. And then there was a deadline coming up when that had to get done, so we had the cap and grade ordinance put in place, and the city approved that cap and grade. This is before I was on the council, so I did lots of research and read lots of things. So the city approved that. Well, 2 weeks later, that was reconsidered, and during that reconsideration, they took these exceptions out that were in there, and they changed it so the only exception was in there were for transit-oriented developments. And they were in a rush to get that in there because their temporary stop deadline was coming up the same month that this was in there. So they went ahead and approved that. Well, soon after that, there was another change in the cap and grade where they put the other exceptions back in there. And then, a while after that, as I was researching it, this one exception left. And I couldn't find any reasoning or conversation about the exception on the twin homes getting taken out of the cap and grade. As I read the Planning Commission's report prior to that, the things that they had discussed in the Planning Commission did not translate over to what happened in the council meeting. And in the council meeting, not only was the twin homes not discussed, but it talked about putting exceptions A through D and not E. And as I read the report, D was the one that was included for twin homes, and E was something else. And somehow, E got on there, but D came off. And so as I follow the research on that, I can't figure out why D was taken off. There's no explanation for D coming off. It didn't go through the Planning Commission and discuss as D coming off. And so the only thing I can find is there was an error that was made at one time, is it went from the Planning Commission to the council, and the council didn't ever discuss it, but they did approve it that way, but they didn't discuss that point. So I think it just kind of went under the radar and made its way through. As a result of that, my desire is to put that back in for duplexes, provided the owner lives in one side. Now I understand that this will need to go back to the Planning Commission, they'll work out the details on it, then it can come back to the council to approve. And that's my desire to do that, and that's my short introduction.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to ask Councilmember Burton a question. So as you gave an example of your son in Provo, and they had to sign a paper that said the owner of the duplex has to live in one side of the duplex, how does the city enforce that? Is there, I mean, is it because the water bill changes, names, or how is that, how do we know that the owner is occupying one half of a duplex?
That's a good question. I guess we could look to Provo and see how they do it, but that's why I wanted to send this to the Planning Commission and let them work those details out, and the staff then provide an answer back for us, and then we could decide if that's an appropriate way to do it or not.
I would suspect it's a deed restriction that once recorded requires any prior purchaser to know that one of the requirements is that the council, whatever form of government allowed that restriction to be attached, runs with the land. They have to be an owner, occupier on one side, then they could rent out. But that would be, I suspect, how they enforced it. Unless it was in a homeowners association, I'm getting a nod from Scott. They would never have agreed, but the deed restriction would be the most obvious choice.
May I just, so they have a deed restriction, but again, who enforces that they follow? I could be a landowner, I know I have a deed restriction, but, I didn't know I was supposed to live in half of it. I'll kick somebody out and move in immediately.
An individual affected by the deed, in the instance in Summit County, we had property that had restrictions on who could live in the home based on the amount of money they made, sort of control or rent control. The county or the city who had impacts as a result of someone renting out or selling the house for more than what it was truly allowed by deed restriction was expected to enforce that. So if there was going to be a restriction in this city, it would probably be Rock Hudson, checking and verifying. It's consumer. It's an expensive way to verify who's owning a home.
Councilmember Burton.
So I don't want to belabor the statistics on this or the ways to do that, other than we could look at that and see if that's something we want. And I would like to make sure that we send it to the Planning Commission and have them work all the details out, then bring it back to us, then we can discuss that, because we haven't gotten this far to decide if that's how we want to do that yet. But I might say that if, for enforcement, our best thing is, if someone lies on there, then we would have a way to do something about them falsifying their statement. But anyway.
I will open the public hearing for item 7B. If you're here to speak on this item, now is the opportunity.
Michael Park. I live at 8770 South, 1480 West. I have this lot. It's been a garden spot for 30 years, but when we developed, I didn't develop, but when they developed twin homes around me, in order to be able to do the same thing when the time came to retire or whatever, I had it zoned for multifamily for a twin home then, and just figured, okay, now I've done all my due diligence, and now I went to sell it and found out that there was a moratorium on these. And I thought, well, I did everything I was supposed to at the time, and so now I'm wondering why, you know, I'm being penalized for doing what I was supposed to earlier, you know. I've been a good member of the city, and, you know, I mean, so I'm just curious of why, you know, I wouldn't be able to fall through, since I, you know, went through all the steps before There's twin homes all around. I've just planned on putting something similar, so it all is the same. There's nothing that's going to stand out. Right now, I've just got a garden lot right in the middle of a subdivision, and so that's my comments.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I might just indicate, the city had a temporary zoning ordinance. They did not impose a moratorium. There's a legal consequence for doing so, and I just want to make the distinction understood.
Steve Jones, 3234 West, 6920 South. You know, there's been some examples given tonight. You know, yeah, it helps maybe some of the younger people and whatever. In this gentleman's issue, you know, I don't really have a dog in that fight, but I'm going to tell you the other side that happens. And one is, it's not enforceable. It's the same thing as having single family dwellings and having a single family in there. And I can attest to you, after 30 years in my neighborhood, that ordinance is not followed. We're constantly having families that have not even related families living together in the same home because of the economic times. Nobody's knocking on their door and booting them out. So to me, that part of it, unenforceable. The other side of it is yeah, I might have an owner in one half of it. He's not renting out the other half of it. He's bringing in all his cousins, brothers, and in-laws in the other half. And so we don't end up with 2 families in there. We end up with 10 families in there. So that's the other side of the coin that happens. I think this moratorium, or whatever you want to call it, is rightfully in place. It's an issue with multifamily dwellings, and it doesn't matter who owns what half of it. And I would not like to see this added and changed and putting this back in. We should treat all these multifamily dwellings exactly what they are, multifamily dwellings. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll close the public hearing for item 7B and return to the council. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, to Mr. Park, I don't believe we've met. I don't believe you and I have met yet, but I know Anthony and Amy, and there's certainly a resemblance, so I'm assuming there's some sort of relation. I have a great deal of respect for the Park family, so thank you for being here. Not speaking specifically to the, Mr. Park's scenario, I will come to that later, but speaking more broadly as to the application of the cap and grade to the city as a whole. In my mind, when the exception for twin homes was removed, on my side, that wasn't necessarily an administrative oversight. That was something I was indeed supportive of. My concern is that as we're looking at opportunities for folks to build multifamily, if we make an exception, that's likely going to become a magnet for folks who are looking to build what's the closest thing that we could get to. I was okay with an exception for senior housing because that's something we desperately need, but I worried with the twin home type of approach, it could easily become an alternative to townhomes. Rather than having 3 or 4 in a block, just do them 2 by 2 and call them twin homes. And it seemed to create a pretty big hole in the cap and grade. With the ownership requiring somebody to live in one and rent and allow them to rent out the other, I'll echo Mr. Jones' comments. I think there's some enforceability issues there. And even if there weren't enforceability issues, I would worry about the units that are being rented out. Hopefully this doesn't come out sounding wrong, but I'm more comfortable with apartments being rented out than I am with owner-occupied or personally owned properties. And the reason for that is if you look at some of our complexes that do have townhomes like Brittany or Tuscany, you find a lot of those are rented out by an owner or rented out by the owner, somebody who doesn't necessarily have experience in going through applications, vetting the folks. And it seems to me, I haven't asked the police or fire for any statistics, but from ride-alongs and anecdotally, it seems that there are more issues with the properties that are not professionally managed and professionally rented than you have issues with the folks that are just kind of doing this on the side, or than you have with the apartments that are doing it professionally. It seems like those, where the owners try and do something a little outside of their normal course of business, this is where we seem to have more problems. So I'm in favor of leaving the cap and grade as it is without allowing for an additional exception for twin homes. That said, Councilmember Burton and I had some interesting conversations at length about Mr. Park's scenario, where this is a property that's appropriately zoned, and there are twin homes around him, so it's not changing the neighborhood, not changing anything else. It's just because of this mechanism that we put in place to try and limit the explosive growth of multifamily housing that was causing issues on our city. So I can see where he's coming from, and rather than taking the approach of adding an additional exemption to the cap and grade, I would prefer we take the approach of directing staff to look into an appeals process so that for the one-off scenarios where we do have somebody who would otherwise fit if not for this timing issue and it's just the one property, that they might be able to do something a little bit sooner rather than having to wait for the entire city to build out. Honestly, the build out of the rest of the city is not going to impact the neighborhood where he's looking to do this. I would think that if we had an appeals process that allows for review and allows for maybe no more than a certain number of units over a certain amount of time, that might be a better course of action rather than opening up another exception and potentially bringing people flocking to that new exception. So I would be opposed to the resolution as written. In fact, I don't think we need a resolution here, but I would be in favor of giving just direction to staff to bring back to council a proposed appeal process to include some allowance for common sense, if that exists in government, to allow for common sense and really a little bit of flexibility where it's obviously appropriate. So that's my thought. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember McConaughey, for your comments. My experience as a contractor doing service work, going back to these buildings, these duplexes and fourplexes and apartments after they're several years old, I can tell you that in most cases, duplexes are in good condition and much better taken care of than fourplexes. Fourplexes are usually an eyesore after several years and sad, and some apartments are as well. But duplexes, I feel much more comfortable, and the work I do there, they're often taken care of better. And then, Scott, can you tell us if this were to change as I have described, how many lots in the city would be affected?
Well, we did a quick tally this afternoon, and as far as vacant existing R2 zones, there are 3 parcels of property left in the city. Now, could someone come in and request an R2? Of course, but that would be at the discretion of the council. There are some existing R2 properties along 2200 West that we did not include. They have single-family homes currently on them. Could they raise those and subdivide? Yes, technically they could if this goes forward. So we're not talking about a huge change here. If it was crafted in a way that it limited it to like an R2 type zoning. And since I have the mic, there was a difference between twin homes and townhomes, and I hope the council understands the difference. Townhomes, you have ownership right underneath the footprint of the home. Twin homes, you have 2 properties next to each other with the home straddling that property line. And so there is a distinction in our code, and I noticed the resolution only addressed twin homes, and so I just wanted to call that out.
That would be correct. I think a twin home also includes the property there, where a townhome, your property's not included. So you have a yard with a twin home, whereas you may or may not with a townhome, depending on its layout. And then I also want to thank Steve Jones for his comments, and I can understand exactly where he's coming from, so thank you for sharing those with us. And as for the enforcement, I guess I still think that most people are generally honest, And for those that aren't, I think quite often we can see the results, and then we would have code enforcement do some background checks and get that cleaned up if that were to be the case.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I can appreciate that it wouldn't apply to a lot of current vacant R2 lots, or it probably wouldn't have a great large citywide effect to go forward with this. But I do agree with Councilman McConaughey that anytime you pass a citywide code change to affect a very small number of parcels, you're going about it the wrong way. I think it's much better to have some sort of an appeal process, some sort of a way for somebody to come in and get an exception to a rule without changing the rule for everybody else. It's just a much cleaner way to do it. I'm very, very mindful of unintended consequences when it comes to passing ordinances, and I'm afraid that there would be unintended consequences here. I don't know what those would be necessarily, but again, it's a citywide applicability that's affecting very few, if only one, parcel in this case. So I would much rather proceed down a road that would allow Mr. Park to get the remedy that he needs without affecting the entire city.
Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. Just taking a minute to echo, and that's it. Councilmember McConaughey and what Councilmember Jacob just said, I would be supportive of going down the road of an appeal process. I know in 2014, when we went down the road of cap and grade, it was a deliberative approach of what we were trying to do, and I don't want to frustrate the success we've had to this point. The appeals process seems like it would more than adequately address this unique situation and other unique situations which I'm sure are to arise. I think that would be the logical way to go.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I am not opposed to the appeals process. In fact, I think whether we make this change or not, I think the appeals process should be there. We should have an appeals process anyway. And whether Mr. Jones chooses to do the appeals process or wait for this to happen, not Jones, I'm sorry, Park. Got the Mr. Park correct. Then I feel this is a flaw in this cap and grade, and I think this should be changed regardless whether he wants to take advantage of this or not. I think this is an important thing that I think is good for the city, and I don't consider duplexes, since they have their own lots and the way the situation is, to be creating high-density problems that we'd get from the other high-density. So I would move to approve this resolution, initiate the land use ordinance text amendment to go forth to the Planning Commission to work out a way to find a way to do this with the twin homes in addition to an appeals process.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Newton. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Oops, sorry. Councilmember Jacob?
No.
Councilmember McConaughey?
No.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
No.
Councilmember Newton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols?
No.
Mayor Roth?
No.
The vote fails 2-5.
Councilmember Burton.
In light of that vote, I move that we direct staff to come back with an appeals process for our cap and grade.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Burton and a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I was a little bit reticent on that second because it's very broad a appeal to the entire cap and grade, I would be open to discussing that, but I worry about opening the floodgates wider than we want and having every developer who's working to build something in the city try and go through an appeals process. My thought is I think this is intended to be more at the smaller property owner, not necessarily the commercial developer. And I don't know that I want to open up the appeals process for everything, but I'm open to have the conversation. So I'll still let my second stay. But that was a thought that was, I guess it wasn't really rushing through my head since it was obvious how slow it was coming out. But that's the concern that I'm going to have as we have that conversation, making sure that this appeals process is geared for the right folks so that we don't cause any other issues and mass inundations of paperwork to staff that really aren't needed and are not likely to fly with the council. So I'll be supportive of the motion in my second at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember McConaughey, I totally understand and I agree. I intentionally left it broad because of the confidence I have in our staff and our planning commission to work those details out and bring us back something that would limit it and make it workable within our city.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to agree with Councilmember McConaughey. I'd like to see that it's either limited by lot size, owner occupied, not more than a duplex or fourplex or something along those lines, so that it isn't too broad. So I don't know. That's just my thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what's been said. I'll go ahead and support the motion with the caveat that I won't necessarily support the ordinance that comes back. But I do support directing staff to get to work on it and with the direction that's been given by the discussion as well. So I'll be in favor of the motion.
David?
Before you vote, let me just frame the question this way. There is a process that's currently in place. If someone asks for and is denied, they can sue the city. That's the process. What you're asking by building in an appeals process is tricky, because what you're going to ask the city council is have the staff create a new standard for cap and grade. So if this is not something we're going to be able to tackle in 2 weeks, we're going to have to look at case law from around the United States to see if a similar appeal process has been attempted or tried. Then we're going to have to look at that appeal as to whether or not there's an actual takings taking place if denied during the appeal, because I don't want to build error into the appeal process. So I'm just giving a heads up to council. It's going to take us some time on the appeal issue process. I think I've talked to council, I've talked to Scott, I've talked to our own legal department. I can comfortably carve out an exception by way of ordinance that I would feel much more comfortable presenting to the council, and that is something I could get back to the council within a month. That when we initially discussed it, we thought we were talking about 12 to 15 lots. When I found out it was 3, I am absolutely certain we can carve out that exception fairly quickly. And it would be by ordinance. You'd have to meet all the requirements, but the land zoning administrator would make the final decision. It would never get to you folks. So the individual in the planning department would ultimately make the decision, does this meet that exception that the city council has approved? If it does, they sign off at the counter and it's done. The person can move forward. A land use zoning administrator could also make a final determination, this is a tough one. I'm going to allow it to go to the city council for final approval. So if that's something that's more palatable, I think we as a staff can head down that road pretty quickly.
I think I'd like to hear from Paul Dodds instead. I'm just kidding. Okay, let me change the motion then. I would move I would request, yes.
Change the word to just
Yeah, I just want to change the words, I just want to take the word appeal out and have a process where exemption can be entertained, granted. Yes, granted would be a better word.
Councilmember McConaughey?
My second would remain with that motion, and just to clarify, the reworded motion is to direct staff to come back with a process where an exception could be granted for twin homes within the cap and grade. Is that right? Okay.
Does that work?
Within the cap and grade.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Burton and a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion to the motion. I will be voting against the motion. 3.5 years ago, it took some real planning with the council and the planning commission to get to this point. I've been back and forth on the twin home issue because it's a hard one, because it's, I don't know whether it's multifamily, just two houses together, but anything that weakens the cap and grade, I'm not in favor of at this point. Let's vote.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Mayor Rolfe,
No.
Councilmember Jacob,
No.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Newton,
Aye.
Councilmember Nichols,
No.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
The vote passes 4-3.
Business item 8A, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 17-234, accepting the audit report and presentation of the consolidated annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017. Bill Piper.
Thanks, Mayor. We recently finished the annual audit, and I would just like to thank everybody that helped with that process. It's quite a process getting ready and completing the audit. And tonight we have Marcus Arbuckle, a partner with Keddington and Christensen, the CPA firm, here to review the audit.
We'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to audit West Jordan City. And as part of an audit, we're required to report several items to governance. We consider the council to be governance of the city. Part of the responsibility of the council is the oversight of the financial reporting process, where management is responsible for the actual financial statements. And audit does not relieve governance or management of those responsibilities. As auditors, we're required to plan and perform an audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards to gain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. And then we issue an opinion on the financial statements. We have issued an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. The opinion is on the basic financial section of the CAFR, which includes the footnotes. The MD&A and the supplementary sections of the report, we provide limited assurance, but the opinion's not on that part. And then the introduction and the statistical section is an unaudited part of the report. Another important part of an audit is the review of the internal controls. Important to note that we don't issue an opinion on the internal controls, but we do review the internal controls that are directly related to the financial reporting process. Those processes include the cash receipting, cash disbursements, the payroll, and then the financial close and reporting process. So we review those, and then we issue findings and recommendations as needed. Another report that we issue as part of their audit is a single audit. Anytime entity
has over $750,000 in expenditures of federal awards. We're required to do a single audit. The major program for West Jordan was the CDBG grant. So we did a single audit on that grant and have no findings with that. It seems like the accounting for that has been good. The last report that we issue as part of the audit is the report on state compliance. With every governmental audit in the state of Utah, the state auditor's office asks us to perform some tests on state compliance. We tested areas in the budgetary compliance, fund balance, justice courts, Utah retirement system, cash management, Open and Public Meetings Act, Treasurer's Bond, impact fees, and restricted taxes and related revenues. We do have a couple findings and recommendations just to talk about real quick. The first is kind of an internal control type thing where we found some errors in the bank reconciliation process, and we've already talked to management and we've got a plan in place to strengthen that internal control just by improving the process, but also having a secondary person review that each month. Then there were a couple of state compliance items to note that in the Craft-Made SID fund, we note that the expenditures in that fund were higher than the amended budget. Just recommend, I mean, I know that's always a difficult one to know because you have to amend that budget in June, and there's sometimes things that come in that you're not aware of. The other thing is in the Open and Public Meetings Act, we noticed that kind of the rule is once meeting minutes are approved, there's supposed to be uploaded within 3 business days, and we just found one of the meeting minutes that weren't uploaded in time. But are there any questions about these reports or findings and recommendations?
Questions from council?
All right.
Marcus, on the statement of revenues and expenditures and changes in fund balance, is that audited?
Yeah, what page are you?
I'm 29.
Page 29.
I guess it's 28 and 29.
Yeah, the budget to actual. Yeah.
That is audited.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and were there questions about that page?
No, I just want to make sure the amount, the surplus fund balance is accurate. And you audited it.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I just wanted it on the record that you audited that number, the 16,838 and 43.
16 million.
Excuse me, 16,838,043 is accurate.
Right. Right.
Because we were told by staff that it would be much less than that during the budget process.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure you audited
that is audited. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Also, we feel that the city has a reliable accounting system and accounting policies. We didn't have any difficulties performing the audit. There are no unrecorded journal entries that we're aware of that needed to be made. Didn't have any disagreements with management. We'd like to thank Bill and his staff. They put a lot of work in to get ready for an audit, and they do a great job. But there's no other questions. Thank you. And
thank you, Marcus. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Councilmember Newton.
Mayor, move that we accept the report, Resolution 17-234, accepting the audit report and the consolidated annual financial report for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Newton and a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion to the motion. I just had one comment for the record again. I believe we're over the 25% allowed by the state for surplus fund balance, again, for the second time in the last 4 years. Let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Ralph,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Newton,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Business item 8B, approve resolution 17-235, authorizing staff to proceed with the final design and construction of the 6700 West, 7800 South intersection as option 1, traffic signal, or option 2, roundabout. Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As we look at our master plan every year, basically, we look at intersections that are causing us difficulties in the community. And in this case, we've identified the intersection at 6700 West and 7800 South as the one where we should put the funds that have been allocated for intersection improvements. We've been through a number of processes, discussions with some of the council members. We've had residents' input. And this evening, we have Nate Nelson, the city engineer, who's going to talk about that a bit. And then also Thomas McMurtry from Avenue Consultants is here, who did the traffic study. And they will talk about the traffic study. Bill Baranowski, our traffic engineer, is also here this evening. What we're looking for is direction from council as to what type of intersection you want us to design and allow us to go forward with that design. Nate.
Nate.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Wendell pretty well summarized it. Just as a little bit of additional background. Over a year ago, we did a study. We looked at 8 different intersections that were a concern, primarily on the west side of the city, intersections in growing areas with increasing traffic, and did a comparison and looked at the delay times, traffic numbers, accident rates, and so forth. And the intersection that we're looking at tonight, 6700 West and 7800 South, it scored the highest in that, and that's the one that we want to direct our attention to. It's the one where we want to direct the funds that we have available to make corrections on. In April, we held a public hearing, or excuse me, an open house where we invited the public to come, and we had a number of exhibits. We talked about roundabouts, we talked about signalized intersections, and we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of both. We received a number of comments. The majority of the comments were from people who liked the idea of a roundabout at that location, but there were also folks who did not like that idea and would rather have a traffic signal. At the time, we had indicated that in order to do a traffic signal, we needed to have a warrant study done to verify that it met the warrants that are established by the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. We've since conducted that warrant study. It was completed in October. It was done by Avenue Consultants, and Thomas McMurtry is here, having been the one who provided that. He's going to talk a little bit about that, what warrants it meets. The good news is that we do feel that the warrants are met, that we can go ahead and proceed with the project. Either or is fine. He'll talk about the two. What we do ask is a decision, roundabout or signal. We're good with either one. We're excited to get moving forward. So, Thomas McMurtry.
Mayor, Council, thank you. I've got several things to go through, but I'll be brief. I'll go as quickly as possible. Councilmember Jacob and Councilmember Anderson have already seen this. We talked to them earlier in terms of what we looked at. I will say before I begin that typically before you can install a signal, you do see if signal warrants are met. If they are met, then you can kind of go ahead and install a signal. However, MUTCD does not require, there's lots of signals that exist that don't meet signal warrants. There's over 2,200 signals in the state of Utah. warrants don't have to be met every time, right? Signals can be installed with some discretion. So we did do signal warrant analysis. This is the intersection question. This is looking north on 6700. The one thing I wanted to point out here is that if you look the number of lanes that are approaching the intersection, we've got a right turn lane, a center turn, or a through lane, and then a left turn lane. That comes up when we look at the warrants. So I just wanted to set the stage before we kind of look at the warrants. We did tube counts and intersection counts. So we had somebody stand out there and count all the movements. So for at least 4 hours during the day on 2 different days, and then we also put tubes down the street at 2 different occasions for several days at a time to collect all the traffic that moves. And this is the traffic that exists out there in the vicinity. You can see the red numbers show the existing traffic volumes that we counted a month ago. And then I put the speeds on there as well, the 85th percentile speed. It was noticeable at times that people were driving above the posted speed limit. And so when we did the analysis, you can see the posted speed limit is 40 miles an hour. And the average is right at there, and the 85th is above it. Anyway, that also comes into play when looking at warrants. This is the turning movement counts of the intersection question. The one number I would point you to is in the AM peak. The number of people turning left, southbound left turners is 136. That is quite high, and of course those people have to stop at a stop sign today. And so anyway, when we look at the warrants, there's several of these numbers that are kind of compiled together, but that's the key. They have to break the continuous flow of traffic on 78 South, and so that's kind of the key number that we're trying to address. It's those people that are trying to help. There's 9 signal warrants in the MUTCD. We looked at all of them. I will say that you could throw out a couple quickly. There's no railroad close, and the coordinated system requires other signals in proximity, and so. But we did look at all of them just to see if any of these warrants were met. You only have to meet warrants one time once to qualify to kind of get the signal. The most typical warrant that is addressed is the peak hour warrant. It's typically peak hour warrant criteria B. It's a graph, and if you can graph your intersection above the line, then that's it. You meet warrants and kind of move on. It's usually the easiest to meet because the level of congestion in the peak hour is the highest. The 4-hour warrant and the 8-hour warrant stretches out the time in which you look at the intersection, and so those are typically more difficult to meet. Again, B is the most common. I mentioned the 70% reduction. Areas that have a speed limit above 40 miles an hour get a reduction in the threshold. Because the speeds are so high on the main line, on the main street, it's harder for people to get out there and turn off of the stop sign. So the threshold is reduced. And this road, I believe, qualifies. So this is the intersection. This is graphed at point. And the thing we're looking for is this dot above the line, the highest line, this 2 or more lanes and 2 or more lanes. I mentioned that we have a right turn pocket and a left turn pocket, and because of that, we're looking at the 2 or more lane line. So it's this line we're trying to get above, not this bottom line. And you can see under normal conditions, it currently doesn't meet warrants. This is the same point on the 70% reduction, so that those lines are reduced, and you can see we're getting a lot closer, but doesn't quite meet today. But again, it's pretty close. The second peak hour criteria is a little bit different. That one requires 150 peak hour trips on the minor street, and we have that. We're above that. We're about 190, right? So it was a 136 turn left, but it was also the 30 going throughs and the other movements as well. And then 800 total vehicles on all 4 approaches, and we meet that as well. There's over 1,000 vehicles on all 4 approaches. The number that's a little difficult to calculate is the total stop delay of 5 hours. And that's every single vehicle that approaches the intersection, any delay that they occur, right? So if they're waiting 30 seconds at the stop sign before they can move, we have to add that up for every vehicle that occurs over the entire thing. And those become difficult to measure. There's a software that does that called PC Warrants. We put the numbers in, and it came back that it did meet this warrant, that they did have over 5 hours of total delay, and those other numbers are met, and so it does meet warrant 3A. The 3A criteria was met. By the way, we also put this in a second software called Synchro Traffic to look at it, because it also gives us a measure of delay. That's, again, it's calculated, and it came back that it was just under that. So anyway, it said it was under the 5 hours, but it was still significant amounts of delay. So it does meet that peak hour warrant A, but just barely. We also looked at the 4-hour warrant, and I'll just show you, it's getting closer to that line when we look at a 4-hour, and we also considered an 8-hour, but again, very, very close, but not quite there. We also considered an 8-hour warrant, and I'll just jump to this graph. This is with the 70% reduction. In this case, we need 8 unique hours of traffic that meet the threshold of, in this case, 1B, which is the continuous flow. And we have 6 unique hours that meet that threshold, but you're supposed to have 8 total to meet the 8-hour warrant. So again, very close, but not quite there on that warrant. We looked at the crashes. There is a warrant for crashes. In this case, it just requires 5 crashes over a 12-month period that could be corrected by a warrant, a signal. And you had 2 years that met that, both 2014 and 2016, had a total number of crashes at this intersection that were above that 5 threshold. This warrant, though, besides having the crashes, also requires the additional criteria of meeting the 8-hour warrant, which, again, we're very, very close, but don't quite meet there. But again, because of these crashes, you know, in consideration with how close we are to the warrants, a signal is recommended or would be in place. Finally, besides the signal, we did also consider a roundabout, and we modeled, actually ran simulations with this intersection under current conditions, both as a signal and as a roundabout. And what we found is that, oh, sorry, I went forward too far. You know, currently, the current level of service is E, and that's on a scale of A to F, like a school grade where F being congested and bad. E is bad, and you can see the average delay is 45 seconds. And so that's a lot of delay. With a roundabout, we get a level of service of A, which is the lowest, the best you can be, and an average delay of 10 seconds on the worst approach. With a signalized intersection, it's a little bit higher. It's B, with an average delay of 18 seconds on the northbound, southbound, and 12 on the east and west. So we get a better level of service on 6700 West with the roundabout, but either one of them is much improved over the existing conditions. I also did a video. Will this play? I want to play. Oh yeah, well. So I put together a brief video kind of showing that simulation. This is synchronous in traffic, and you can see this is existing AM peak, and you can see we have a queue kind of on the north end of all these people that are, you know, entering the intersection, waiting to turn left at the stop sign. And you can see the queue eventually will empty, and then the mainline traffic doesn't stop at all. This is the same thing with the signal. The queue just emptied. You can see all those 6 cars just turn left, and then the signal goes red, and then, you know, we stop the main line, and the main line will eventually go with the signal. Again, improved level of service over the stop sign, reduced delay overall. It's a good solution. The roundabout just has a little bit less delay, and this is the roundabout option. And you can see these cars are actually turning left, so they come down, swing around the roundabout, and then go out. Again, the model shows that there's less delay with the roundabout than with the signal. Either one of them, again, an improvement over the existing conditions. So. Finally, just that, you know, it meets the peak hour on that peak hour A, so, you know, you would be justified in putting a signal in. It's very close on the other warrants. The good news is we actually did some traffic projections, so, you know, if we look out to the future, those other warrants will be met very, very shortly. If they all met on a 5-year projection, we didn't do a 1-year projection, but I would suspect that all of those warrants are going to be met very quickly as traffic in the area kind of continues to grow. So you can feel confident whichever one you go with. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions from council?
I do.
Councilmember Newton.
On your simulation there, you showed 1 lane in each direction. I'm assuming from what we see further to the east that 78 South will be at least 2 lanes in each direction. How does that affect the situation there?
That's a good question. I will say, if I go all the way back to the first slide where I show the existing volumes. So, you know, there's about 12,000 cars a day right now in 78 between 64 and 67. There's a travel demand model that the Washington Traffic Regional Council maintains that looks out to 2040, and they are projecting the year 2040 that volume going up to 21 or 22,000 cars a day. So there is going to be increased volume. Again, that's years down the road, but the roundabout design, is more kind of in Bill's neighborhood, and he's got it so that there's a free right. There's enough right of way to have 5 lanes or have 4 lanes approaches, and the roundabout would continue to function with 4 lanes. So there's several examples of multi-lane roundabouts and kind of how they work. I will say that the max volume that's projected by year 2040 is not so high that the roundabout design is a concern.
Okay, I like roundabouts personally. I've used them overseas and in different areas, and they seem to work really well, especially if there's just two-way traffic. I'm not so sold on them when there's multiple lanes, and I guess that was where my question was coming from. Is there statistics about problems or crashes in that situation where you have multiple lanes?
So there is statistics on roundabouts versus signals, and the types of crashes that occur when you implement or take action on one thing versus another. I will say in either condition, typically when you install a signal, typically the number of crashes goes up, but the severity goes down. The types of crashes you get are rear end type of crashes when somebody stops at the signal that on 78 that they weren't expecting or whatever. And so you typically don't have as many fatalities or severe injury crashes, but the total number go up. With roundabouts, the numbers are a little bit lower, so they actually anticipate fewer crashes. The crashes occur at lower speed because the people in a roundabout are going slower. And so, again, the severity of crashes with roundabouts is low, right? But the total numbers, roundabouts typically have fewer crashes than signals just in general.
Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you go back to the slide with the grades?
The grades, yes.
Yeah.
Shoot.
E is bad.
It was like near the end, 14, there it is.
Yeah, okay, so the question that I had on this, is this grade solely for getting through the intersection, or is this the grade for kind of the stretch of road in its entirety? Because what I'm having a hard time reconciling is the idea that a roundabout would have a grade of A, but a signalized intersection would have a grade of B. Well, at the roundabout, you're going from 43 miles an hour down to 12 to 15 miles an hour, versus the signalized intersection, if it's properly timed, you may not have any stop at all. So I'm trying to reconcile how the roundabout could have a better grade than the signal.
Right, so to answer your question, the grades, the A, B, C, or D, are entirely measured by delay. So the only thing that counts is number of seconds of delay. And with signals, you're right that a lot of cars will get through on green and might not have to stop at all and will have literally 0 delay. It might have, half a second if they approach the end of the queue or whatever it is. But then the cars that are stopped have, all of that stop time is entirely delayed. Right? And so if you're on the cross streets, all of your red time is measured in delay, and then when it switches and you get to green time, then the red time on the other streets are measured. So, and it does take into account the vehicles that literally have 0. So it measures all of the delay that occurs, only the red time, right? Because green time, it's free flow. And then divides that by the total number of vehicles that enter. And the roundabout does the same thing. The issue, though, on the roundabout is there's almost no measurable delay. Because while you slow down and accumulate a second or 2 or 3, even as you yield and kind of get into it, you're going slower, but you're still moving. And so, in terms of measuring delay, that's how it's done. So it does take into the fact that some people have 0 seconds, that they go through the intersection without ever stopping. But some people have 50 seconds because they sat at the red light the whole time.
So it's conceivable that the roundabout, everybody could have 0, even though everyone else has to slow down from 45 to 10 miles an hour or 3 miles an hour. As long as they're not at 0, that's not seen as a delay.
Well, it's measured, but again, it's relatively small, right? The delay that you're measuring is 1 or 2, is a number of seconds that's fewer than 10. Whereas if you stop at a red light, you're going to have more than 10 seconds of delay, guaranteed.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know, I've driven through and I've been through the Daybreak roundabouts that are 2 lanes, but they seem to be, I don't know what the diameter is of them.
Yeah, they're like 180 feet. They're big.
Yeah, and And that's what I see with a two-lane roundabout. So if this does become a roundabout, is there space for a 180-foot diameter at 6700 West? If 78th is now going to be bidirectional all the way, and things like that, is there room for a 180 feet diameter roundabout?
Bill, do you want to speak to the design of the layout of the?
Yes, it is large enough.
I just like to say that Thomas, everything he said was true. It was really good. So in Daybreak, the roundabouts, I've measured them, and a friend of mine designed them. They're all 220 feet, which is really extra large. And the ones we proposed at this location and elsewhere in the city, the ones we currently have are 180 feet. So they're 40 feet smaller in diameter. And once you get up to about 165 feet, that extra width allows more landscaping. And I think it does allow for a little bit higher speeds. So the ones in Daybreak, I estimate they have maybe 3 to 4 to 5 miles per hour faster because you got more of a racetrack effect going on.
Okay, and for me, it seems like I've got more time to contemplate a decision with the Daybreak type roundabouts than I do in our city, because they seem smaller to me and I've got to think much quicker.
And I'd have to say that our roundabouts are not, the one on 78 South is not complete yet. There's still more widening to go to the west. But you do have a good point. In the Daybreak roundabouts, the middle island they have is huge between the lanes going in and lanes going out, and actually widened to a big shopping center. So they've made that so wide that it is easier to enter and exit, because that decision space is probably triple what we have in the Smiths roundabouts. So that's a good observation.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things I want to point out from the staff report and the introduction that we had that were incomplete, let's say. The meeting that was held in April was at Fox Hollow Elementary School. I was there for practically the whole thing. The exhibits that were shown showed that this intersection would not warrant a light for 5 years. So when you receive a staff report that says 9 were in favor of the roundabout, that's because 9 don't like what it is now and preferred a roundabout over the status quo, because they were told at that meeting this won't get a light for 5 years, at least. It may never warrant a light, we were told. So just to kind of put some context around some of the comments that have been made. I first started getting involved with the city in 2012. I got on the Healthy West Jordan Committee. And at that time, my neighbors came up to me and said, "What can you do about getting a light at this intersection?" I said, "I'm on the Healthy West Jordan Committee. I can get you a good 5K. Shortly thereafter, I was appointed to the Planning Commission. And my neighbors came to me and said, "What can you do about getting us a light at this intersection?" And I said, "Well, I can approve or not approve subdivisions, but I can't do much about a light." And then 2 years ago, I got elected to the city council, and my neighbors came to me and said, "What can you do about getting a light at this intersection?" Needless to say, this is my neighborhood, by the way. So at that point, I started asking questions. I asked the city manager at the time, when was the last traffic study done? Can we get a new traffic study? I pointed to a traffic study that was done by one of the developers out in this neighborhood who was proposing new developments, and they said, "Look, this level of service is really bad. It would do better with a light, especially once our developments are going in." And now their developments are 80% in, 75% in as far as the single family around the Highlands and the Maple Hills. and the Terrace Hills subdivisions that are all new since that time. In any case, the neighborhood, to me, has been asking, clamoring, begging for a signalized intersection here for 5 years at least. I would be happy to listen to the entire discussion, of course. Council, of course, passed an ordinance from Councilmember Anderson a couple months back, June. I was going to say 6 months ago. I would have been right. Limiting or saying that roundabouts on arterial streets were less than desired, and that when they go in, they had to have council-specific approval. As much as I can appreciate a roundabout in this situation, more of my neighbors have expressed to me that they would like a light than a roundabout. I won't say that there's no appetite for a roundabout, there it is, but more have asked me for a light. And just put that out there. I'll be happy to listen to discussion before a motion.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple questions for staff. One of the items that was in the packet was the $700,000 price tag. I think it said we had, what was it, $450,000 available with an additional $150,000 coming next year. My question would be, if we were to give approval to move forward, where would the funding be coming from? And would there be other projects that would be put aside? And I'm asking this question knowing that there's a couple people in the audience staring me down, knowing that they have to deal every day with 7800 South and 13th West. So that's kind of the impetus for the question.
We work with David Murphy. He's the capital improvements manager, and he takes money from, the city receives an annual contribution from Class B and C road funds, which is for maintenance and so forth and upgrades. My understanding is that he gets a certain amount each year, and he puts a certain amount of that into an account for intersection improvements. Our intention is that, yeah, there's about $450,000 in that fund right now that are available. More will come in at the beginning of the upcoming year that will budget into the next year's fiscal cycle. So by next July, there should be enough money, we believe, to cover the project.
So the project could be addressed without putting any other existing or known projects in jeopardy, such as 78th and 13th, correct?
That's correct. There's no, we wouldn't be taking from one project to fund this.
Okay. My only question there, thank you. Other observation, just random observation on the packet, it was showing a list of the traffic signals. 70 South and 1950 West Camelot Way is listed on there. All of the others are called out where it's just a crossing or a hawk signal or something like that. PedExing, 7400 South, 4800 West. For some reason, this didn't seem to be labeled as a pedestrian crossing rather than a full signal. The last thing I'll throw out is I'm trying to be open to the idea of roundabouts. I'm just not a fan. I like that they keep you moving, but after doing, prior to being on the city council, I spent about 2 years as a volunteer firefighter. Ambulances and fire trucks don't always do well with roundabouts. I've done a couple of ride-alongs with our snowplows. Snowplows don't do well with roundabouts either. You get semis or some of those longer vehicles going through the roundabouts, especially where this is on 7800 South, right off of Mountain View Corridor. Mountain View Corridor is slated to connect to 201, hopefully I-80 not too far out, so I anticipate a fair amount of heavy traffic like those semis coming down there. I'm having a really hard time supporting the idea of allowing for a roundabout on 7800 South. So I would be wholeheartedly supportive of giving direction to staff and authorizing the necessary funding to proceed with the signalized intersection sooner rather than later, but not so much for a roundabout. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just kind of want to echo that since I proposed a resolution that stopped roundabouts on arterial streets back in June. I'm not supportive of roundabouts. I think they have their place. I just do not feel that the way they operate on an arterial is the best course. And there's other cities that have similar policies where they just don't put roundabouts on arterial streets. So I would be also supportive of putting a traffic light at this intersection. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. If you all just bear with me for about 2 minutes of levity, which is imagine yourself in the city of Paris in a rental car, your first time there, and you end up in the roundabout at Arc de Triomphe, which is an 8-lane roundabout with 12 intersections that come to that roundabout. And when Google just takes you there, because it's the shortest route, it's both fun and terrorizing. But yeah, that set aside, I personally am one who have always enjoyed roundabouts. There's an island in the Caribbean that I frequent, Providenciales. They call it Provo for short. So when I talk about Provo, it's frequently about the Caribbean, not our neighbors to the south. But this island has 30,000 inhabitants and not a signaled intersection. They're all roundabouts, and traffic moves. It's just really interesting how that happens. And so I've always been a fan of roundabouts. On this issue, I really could go either way. I'm not sold on one way or the other. I personally really enjoy them, but it does require time to get used to them. And once you're used to them, traffic just moves. Rarely do you have to stop. In fact, the roundabouts that are out on 48th West, right near my place, I manage those so well, I usually terrify my wife. She's like, "Are you going to slow down?" And I'm like, "There's no traffic coming. Why should I stop?" And you just, the obligation is to yield if there's traffic. That's it. And anyway, but on this issue, I'm not going to hang my hat on it. I'd go either way, whatever the council wants to go. I like them, but it is what it is.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. So bicycling roundabouts is a whole nother story. It's not as enticing to take a bicycle through a roundabout, particularly if there's multiple lanes and there's more traffic. Even the ones in Daybreak that are larger are a bit of a challenge. So as a result of that, I move to adopt Resolution 17-235, authorizing the staff to proceed with the final design and construction on the 6700 West, 7800 South intersection as option 1, traffic signal.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question for staff. Construction timeline on a light versus a roundabout. How soon can one get started over the other? Does a light necessarily require the widening of 7800 South on the east side of the intersection? We got 35 feet of right-of-way there that we can widen that to. Does that have to go in with the light, or can the light go in?
Yeah, my understanding is that on the, what is it, Bill, on the east, on the southeast leg, we would do some intersection widening, some lane widening right there. The good news is we have all the right-of-way we need for either option. Right. We would go ahead and start design, and probably, I spoke with Dave Murphy about this today, probably construction wouldn't begin until late next summer, fall, at the, probably, summer at the earliest, most likely the spring of 19.
Okay. Thank you, and can I say, please go faster.
We will work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to comment that I'll be supporting the motion. You can't physically drive a loaded semi through the roundabout on 7800 at Smith's location, I don't know what west that is, just west of 5600, and stay in the lane. It's impossible. Let's vote.
Councilmember Newton.
I'll echo Councilmember Nichols. I can go either way, but it sounds to me like the council is in favor of the signalized intersection, so I will vote yay.
Well, I apologize. You were first then. Councilmember Anderson.
Absolutely, yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob.
On behalf of a grateful neighborhood, yes.
Councilmember Nichols.
Yes.
Mayor Rolfe.
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Yes, and I'd like to move for a recess after this vote's done.
The vote passes 7 in favor.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Nichols. All in favor? Aye. 5 minutes only, please. We still got A lot of agenda items. So you can
What is our firm? I don't. Our firm, we got the design firm, and we do light intersection coordination.
There probably is.
Well, the earthwork is a little less. I don't know about intrusive. Your black and green's kind of realistic, so that's an intrusion.
You look at the one on the river.
But,
We're in South Florida. It does, it approaches like they've already started. Even on the side street.
yeah, you can do it with that. But if you really,
Large fire trucks go fast.
the other thing I was just thinking about is that if there are opportunities and stuff, I mean, no.
Then I'm on it then.
Item 8C, discussion and possible action regarding general land use map amendments for 24.08 acres from public facilities to medium-density residential and rezone 24.08 acres from PF, public facility zone, to R18E, single-family residential lot, 8,000 square foot lot, for property located at 5411 West, 9,000 South. Michelle Investment. Scott.
Thanks, Mayor, Council. We've got Ray McCandless here. Just as a quick refresher, this went before the Council on November 8th for public hearing. The Council tabled the item until March 2018, or no later than March 2018, to give the applicant an opportunity to revise their proposal. Ray, anything else? Come on up.
I'll just shout it out here from there. The applicant, following the city council meeting on November 8th, went back and considered what the council talked about in the last meeting, and they can now come back with a rezoning request. Instead of an R18C zoning district, they're actually looking at increasing the minimum house size to an R18E or an R18E zoning district. They would also amend the future land use map to a medium density residential to reflect that zoning. We've already been through the slides oriented with the site. I think you're pretty familiar with it. And during the citizen comment, I think you got a pretty good feel for what the issues were at the last meeting and also at the Planning Commission meeting. So it's a pretty straightforward request. The question is whether or not you feel that the use itself or that zoning designation is correct and a good fit for this property. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ray? Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So at the top of the packet with today's meeting date on there, it shows a staff recommendation is to deny the proposal. Is that a carryover from the initial, or is that still the staff's recommendation based on the new home size?
That's still a carry. That's still the same recommendation. Our thought was, with the initial proposal, was that all the properties to the east of this site, all the home sizes are 10,000 square feet and larger. So we just felt that homes over 10,000 square feet, with the lot size of 10,000 square feet, would be just a better fit for this area. So our recommendation still stands.
Okay. Thank you.
Guess that's everything, Ray. Thank you. Council? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. No, maybe I should have asked this when Ray was up there, but the thing that I still struggle with from all of the previous meetings that we've had is the second ingress egress off Bagley Park Road into an industrial area. And I don't know if there's other options. Just looking at the map, I don't see any other way except going through a neighborhood, which means taking a house, which I don't know that I'm there, but is that an appropriate ingress egress point for a residential neighborhood?
Well, one of the issues that you have here is there's quite a topographic grade difference between this side and this side. I think it's 6 or 8 feet at least. So it would be at least one house, and then there would be the issue of whether or not these residents here would be in support of additional traffic going through the neighborhood. So that the access to the south was an issue that was brought up at the last meeting. Is correct.
Is there, do we have things like this in other parts of the city where a residential area comes out in an industrial? I mean, is that a common thing?
I wouldn't say it's a common thing. I think
you would say yes, it is.
I would say it would not be a common thing.
Not be a common thing. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe there's at least one other area that I can think of over towards Snugs and Dannon, where there's a residential neighborhood, practically smack in the middle of the industrial section, across from the Ronwood Ballpark there, to the south. So I wouldn't say it's unprecedented. I would say it looks to me like that access is mostly to meet the code for the two ingress egresses for safety and all of that. I don't see it being heavily used. If I was just putting myself in the situation, if I were to buy a house in this neighborhood, I would go out onto 90th South for almost every, unless for some reason I needed to go south for some reason. I can't think of any good reason why I would want to go out to the south unless I worked in that neighborhood. Kids on bikes, same thing. You know, I don't see any reason why kids on bikes would need to go out that way or would even want to. Especially considering the condition of the roads in that industrial area. I don't like riding bikes through there. I have, and they're not nice roads. As far as residential encroaching on industrial space, it is an issue. However, there's already apartments here. The residential is already encroached. We've been there, done that. If we were going to go down that road, the appropriate time to go down that road would have been before those apartments went in. You know, the high school's not far from here. There's a lot of there's an elementary school just barely off the north end of this picture. There's a lot of things that nullify a lot of the arguments that residential doesn't belong here. I don't think there's really anything else that does belong here. To me, this makes as much sense as anything else I could see being put here, especially with the apartments. It's kind of sandwiched between apartments and homes. It makes sense to have a slightly denser single-family home between a less dense zone and a high-dense residential zone. I don't see what else would go here. I'm leaning in favor of this, if you could pick that one up.
Councilmember Newton.
I turned myself off. I worked out there at Westridge for 3 years, and there's very little traffic on that road, so that doesn't worry me. In fact, we've taken the boys from the academy on our bikes out there to the west and south with very little concern and most times. So that doesn't bother me. And the R18E, we approved the airport property a couple of weeks ago with that same zoning, R18E. With those E-size homes, I think, I don't think this is going to be a classy subdivision. and I mentioned before, the Ivory Highlands, I checked on that, and even though it's in Taylorsville, it is the same zoning, R18E. And I have 10,000 square foot lots next to me, and I will guarantee you that that Ivory Highlands is a much better project than in my neighborhood with 10,000 foot lots. So I don't think the lot size in this case is the deciding factor.
Could I ask you one question? How many students or how many residents live in?
It varies, obviously. Right now, there are around 60 students there, plus the staff. There's 1, 2, 3, I think there's 8 homes. They have had up to 200 or so.
So it's quite dense.
Young men in there. So.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am very familiar with this area. I actually drive this road quite often, daytime and nighttime. Nighttimes because we hold our scout meetings at Westridge Academy. Daytimes because I go to some of the businesses that are back in that area, and I've bicycled it. So that road is a decent road. It does have landscaping on the side, it has curb and gutter, but there are no sidewalks. My biggest concern is still that entrance going onto there, but I don't see any other way to do an entrance into the subdivision, the second entrance, than that location there. My biggest concern is that road is not well used very much at night. It's not lit, but during the daytime it has some bigger trucks on there, and it does have a little bit higher speed limit on there, so it creates a little bit of a hazard if kids wanted to walk on there beyond bicycles, because they will be actually in the street itself. Despite all that, I will likely be supporting this motion.
Are you making a motion? Councilmember Anderson.
Yeah, so I guess going the other way, trucks from the industrial area wanting to get maybe a little quicker way to 90th could traverse through the neighborhood. You don't think that would happen? Small, large trucks? Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Newton.
I will make a motion. Move that we approve the general land use map amendment for 24.0 acres from public facilities to medium density residential and rezone 24.08 acres from public facilities to R18E for the property in question.
I'll second it, that way I can support my motion.
We have a motion from Councilmember Newton, a second from Councilmember Burton. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. On the trucks going through there, I'm not so convinced. We may end up having to have the city put up no trucks or something in there, because we've seen that happen at 40th West and Old Dam. Trucks just don't like that signal. They don't like that turn. Here, I don't think that's going to happen, but what they were doing is they're cutting through the neighborhood there, which surprised me. When people said they're doing that, there's dump trucks generally. They just didn't like turning on to 40th West, so they'd cut right through the neighborhood. So that's something that may need to be revisited down the road. Looking at some of these, to me, the perfect solution would be a mixed zoning situation, but as we've already brought up, in the city, we generally look at 50 acres or more to do that. So that's really not our answer. To me, I mean, this is just a concept, I know, and we're not really voting on a concept here tonight, but what we are is just the rezone. So with me, I'm going to be supportive of the motion, but I'm going to encourage the developer to lean towards that. We have R110 on the east. You've got high density apartments on the west. There is a transition. R18 makes sense. It's a great transition between the two. The industrial piece, yeah, it's on the southwest corner, but it's such an insignificant corner of the entire lot. It's a piece, but I'm more worried about the two residential on the north, the west, and the east. But if the developer can put that in there, those eastern lots are a little bit bigger. They come out at 9,000 square feet or 9,500 square feet. It would mean a lot, I know, to the neighborhoods. But R18 would, I still think would be sufficient. So I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to underscore what Councilmember Nichols said and encourage the developer to really give some serious thought and consideration to that idea. Obviously, that wouldn't be codified, the recommendation wouldn't be codified with the change that's been proposed, but I would highly encourage consideration of what you suggested on that, especially on the east side. Overall, I'm a little bit disappointed with where we're at. Again, this isn't due to the developer, but it's just looking at this area in general. We've got 90 South right off of Mountain View Corridor. In fact, can I take the presentation again just for a second? And this is why I feel like we kind of missed an opportunity here. You've got Mountain View Corridor off on the west side, 90th South. We're going to have an intersection at the intersection of 5600 West right there. This is a lot of traffic. This is one of our few freeway access points in the city. We're severely limited there. I would have loved to see the opportunity for some prime retail or prime commercial right in this area. However, as Councilmember Jacob already pointed out, that ship kind of sailed when the apartments went in. So I'm now trying to figure out what we can do here. Adding another access point to 90 South has me a little bit worried. You've got light of 56, access right here, adding another access point right here, then the church, then this other subdivision. A lot of it's just really, really tight, and I worry about the amount of traffic. Again, you've got the kids that are going to be, or the families right out here that are only going to have that access on 90 South right off of a freeway off-ramp, trying to get out of there, turn left. I think we're still going to see a fair amount of traffic from the subdivision coming out to Bagley Park and coming up here and trying to turn left at the light. I think it might be beneficial for us to see if we can find some of the improvements, like Councilmember Burton was talking about the lack of lighting and sidewalk. Anyway, I don't know that this is the best option, putting additional residential in there, but I really don't know if there's a good answer at this point in time. So again, I would underscore what Councilmember Nichols said and see if we can't do the best possible to try and match the development to the east, at least for the homes that are right up against it. So having said that, although I don't think this is the optimal solution, I'll still be supportive of the motion. Thank you.
Let's vote.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Newton?
Aye.
Mayor Ralph?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
No.
Councilmember Nichols?
Yes.
The vote passes 6-1.
Item 8D, I've had a request to table this item for further information. Is there anyone on the council opposed to moving this to a future date? Let's table this until a future date. We'll set it at some point. Item 8E, reconsideration regarding City Council action November 21st, 2017, authorizing a payment to Ralph and Christine Mendel for flooding in their home. Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, my purpose in reconsideration isn't saying that I don't believe that there was any damage that happened there. I'm not saying that we don't have any responsibility. What I'm asking...
I know it's not my place, but you first need a motion to even reconsider it.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
So my purpose in bringing this up for reconsideration is simply because, thank you, the documentation for the decision that I made at our last meeting was insufficient for making a decision, and my desire for reconsidering is to give the city staff time and me time to review the information in order to make an intelligent decision. So that's my purpose of reconsidering, so I can have the information to make a decision with, and I'm just looking for information. So I move to reconsider. So I move to reconsider whatever that number is.
8E.
Second.
Thank you.
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Nichols. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you. Can you just recap? I wasn't here. I did listen to both meetings that I wasn't here for. Can you remind me what was decided at the last meeting?
To pay them $10,000 from the
Was
storm drain.
approved. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
was approved.
Okay, thank you.
Let's vote on the reconsideration of item
Correct.
8E.
Mayor Rolfe,
No.
Councilmember Newton,
No.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Bill passes 5-2.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. So after our last meeting, I sent an email to staff listing several items that I wanted to have so I could have some information in order to substantiate my decision or to make a different decision. And thank you, staff, for getting that information to me. However, I did not receive that until yesterday, but I did receive it, so I was pleased. And since yesterday, I was still working on the cap and grade, as I was today. I haven't substantially reviewed that information yet. As a result of that, I would like to schedule our considering this ordinance to our next council meeting in December 20th. That's my motion.
Yes, motion.
Second. And may I have the floor to discuss that?
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Nichols. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. I would say I'm in favor of that as long as we get that same information, because as I know, I don't think I do, because that's really what I'm after. I want to have the whole picture. Thank you.
I can't tell you because I didn't read it.
Let's vote.
Councilmember Nichols,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton,
Yes.
Mayor Rolfe,
No.
Councilmember Newton,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey,
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Vote passes 6-1 in favor.
Item 8F, discussion and possible action regarding sewer rates. This is my item. Back in November of 2016, the sewer rate was increased. Can you pull that up, Melanie?
Scott, there's just a PDF. Mission Impossible. This is Mission Impossible.
That's to get my kids home, not me. Sorry.
Back in November of 2016, a sewer rate increase was placed into effect on December 1st of 2016, first phase, and then a second phase went into effect automatically on July 1st, 2017. We did talk about this about that time and postponed discussion on it. It was noted at the time that Mayor Rolfe was not in support of the increase, with over $10 million in restricted and unrestricted dollars was more than the annual cost to operate the entire sewer system of West Jordan. Councilmember Nichols supported the motion, felt the unrestricted balance would be gone in 2 years. Without the change, it failed, or excuse me, it passed on a 4-3 vote. I'd just like to point out that as of October 31st, 2017, as you can see, the unrestricted portion is $12,062,592.37, and the annual operating cost of the sewer system is approximately $8 million. So I believe that the second phase of that increase should be repealed. I believe it's 7% that went into effect July 1st. I'd like to hear the council's opinion of this. But just with the unrestricted portion of the sewer fund, we could operate the sewer system as it exists today for 1 year and 6 months without a dime coming in as a sewer bill. If you add the restricted portion, you can't hear me? Sorry. If you add the restricted portion, it goes way beyond that. So it's a little over 15 million. So I'd like to hear what the council has to say, what you believe, and I believe there needs to be guidelines set on the maximum surplus fund balance in all of the enterprise funds. But 150% seems exorbitant to me. Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. And I agree with that statement, with what you just said, but more than just the balance is there's a bigger picture, a much bigger picture than the balance, and that's capital expenses. Where are those expenses going to be made? What's the plan? How soon will they be expended? If they're not spent in the next 2 years, I wholeheartedly agree with you. If there's no plan, we're not spending them, yeah, there's no reason to be sitting on this. But if we have a capital expense plan to improve our infrastructure, that's to me why we have the balance. And that was my understanding why we were supportive of this, is for the capital improvements. So maybe we can, my direction might be more towards Wendell's side of the room to see, you know, what is our capital improvement plan specifically for sewer, and because this balance is growing. The way I would suspect at this point, we're looking for a massive overhaul as far as the capital improvements, but that's what I expect. So I'll ask you, do we have a plan for that?
Well, we have a capital improvement plan, but at this point, I don't know that I can address your concern. We could bring it back and present that to you if you'd like.
Well, just to point out that we have 3.4 million in impact fees on top of the 12 million that sits in unrestricted fund balance. That's a pretty significant.
It's significant. I agree, and I have to concede that. So with me, maybe what I would say tonight, rather than taking action, to me, that's the whole picture. I'm all about lowering the fees. If we don't need that balance, let's cut it. But the whole picture is that capital improvement plan. We've got to see that, because if we're looking to spend 25 million over the next 5 years, why would we cut it when we're in that growth pattern to spend 25 million? I'm just throwing out a number. I don't know what it is. But if we're not, then let's reduce the fee. We don't need it. But I'd be all about bringing it back next time, showing the capital improvement plan in conjunction with this balance to see how that's going to play out.
But again, growth, we talked about this at length the last few meetings. Growth should be supported through impact fees, not through the existing residents. And this is the entire residents as a whole, not the new impacts. So, Councilmember McConaughey.
I'll stall for just a second. It looks like Mr. Piper might have something to add.
I just wanted to point out the impact fees in the sewer fund are actually a negative $3 million.
As of June 30th, the balance is, counting unrestricted and restricted, is $9,330,867. So just wanted to clarify that point.
Okay, that's not what it said. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you scroll down just a little bit so we can see the votes on here? Not something I'm proud of, but we'll highlight it. So it passed on a 4-3 vote. I was in favor of this. My thought at the time was there's still, I can't remember how much we had on the meeting. I think this was one where it was getting a little bit late, and I thought, I'm supportive of the increase in sewer right now. And when we discuss the fee schedule, we'll have an opportunity to have further discussion about the additional increase at that point in time. So I thought, there's really no harm in supporting this. We'll be able to have further conversation later. We never did have further conversation later. The fee schedule was presented as, here you go, there are no changes, let's move on, and this completely slipped my mind. This is one of the few votes I feel bad about having made. I should have said no and supported just the increase that I was comfortable with. So that puts us in an awkward position today. And what's running through my mind is A, like Councilmember Nichols said, I'd like to see what expenses are anticipated and what's necessary. B, I know we have some deficiencies in sewer, and we talked about not long ago adding an additional truck and an additional crew to help take care of the work that's out there, something that's been requested for more than 10 years, and we're able to do that. I want to make sure that if we change something with the rate structure, it doesn't impact what action we took to say, yes, we need to take additional steps to maintain our sewer system. I don't want to hurt that by changing the rate back and reversing course without having solid numbers in front of me. So I'm kind of on the fence. I think where we're at right now with cash, 12 million, way more than we should have. But at the same time, I'm a little bit hesitant until we have actual numbers saying what, well. So different thought. Rather than saying I don't want to take any action until we have numbers from staff supporting a change, I'm wondering if it would be smarter to say let's make the change to reverse the rates for the sewer fee effective in short order, barring anything surprising coming from the numbers that staff present, and then make the formal decision maybe the meeting on the 20th or the second meeting in January. But rather than say we'll just sit back and do nothing, at least put the gears in motion. I'm just thinking out loud kind of on the fly. I'd love to hear any other thoughts, but this is the one that gives me heartburn because I feel like I made a mistake on this vote, and had I voted different, we wouldn't be in this predicament today. So I'd love to hear additional thought.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. And I won't put all the blame on you. So my question is to staff, and before I was on the council, I remember something, so check my memory. Did we transfer money from this fund to something else? Was this one?
Solid waste.
That was solid waste. Oh, okay. A different kind of trash. Thank you. And as you can see, I voted against this back at that time, and I would be in favor of repealing that at this stage of the game.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if there's anybody from staff who's here.
There is. Steve Glean is also present in the audience.
I thought I saw him back there. He was hiding behind Chad. That could speak to, I seem to recall looking at this and seeing a large capital project in the next year or two and just going to what Councilmember Nichols just said, is that we don't have the whole picture that we had. So remembering why we voted the way we voted, and I think I like this because of that, and I don't think I liked it because of this. We're not looking at the whole picture tonight, right here. We discussed this ad nauseum in several meetings. And I seem to recall that there was a large, because of an audit, or there was something that necessitated a large expenditure in the next year or 18 months in the sewer fund.
Councilman Jacob, it's David Brickey. Sorry. I'm talking to Steve Glean and preparing for potentially somewhat of a discussion about this. There is a requirement that we're going to have to remove grit and phosphorus from the waters, from the sewer system in significant magnitude starting in 2 years. The current operating cost is currently estimated to be $8 million a year. Thus, the mayor's response about what exists now and why we could pay for it without taking any more money. On the other hand, just recently, within the last 2 weeks, the sewer district identified that the ongoing expenses for the next 5 years, starting fairly soon, this next year, will move to $11.5 million to compensate for the costs of those improvements. There's also, as Councilman McConaughey pointed out, something that we are considering in the very next, the next council meeting, the budget discussion that will include the TV truck and the associated costs of purchasing that, manning it, managing it. So if you're wanting additional information, there's a great deal of information out there, but if you leave the amount as it is now, you'll be able to pay for that increase of $11.5 million a year. The mayor and I had a significant, lengthy discussion about whether or not that's appropriate to start collecting money today for a use that will be in 2020. And that's a policy decision that you folks have to make. We can get you additional information next time, but the mayor's concern or comment to me was, how much is enough? And if I misstated something, Mayor, in your, with your questions.
How much is enough? Is 200% enough of operating costs? Is 300% enough?
I certainly want more. I want enough.
The state requires us to be 25% or less on our general fund.
My answer to that, my answer would be, I want enough to cover this next year, plus 20% in case there's an emergency, something that is significant, unseen. The legislature has identified 25% as being an appropriate percentage. In this instance, we tried to find out what the national or state standard would be, and there doesn't appear to be one. That's something for you folks, I suppose, to debate. And that's why we can't find that. Steve, if I've misstated something, please step forward and let me know if I'm out on a limb. Thank you. So
I have a question. Where did the, how does it get from 8 million up to 11.5 in 1 year? Are we trying to say that the debt service on the sewer line, the sewer treatment plant is $3 million or $2.5 million our debt service?
That I would have to get additional information. I do not know that answer tonight.
Mayor, if I may,
please.
Thank you for those answers. That's what I recalled, was that there was a large change coming. I like to think of myself, I know I'm labeled by lots of people, lots of different things, but I like to think of myself as rather fiscally conservative and keeping taxes and fees as low as they feasibly can be. That said, I'm also feel that it is fiscally responsible to plan for the future. I don't feel it is fiscally responsible to look at what is right now and assume what is right now will always be, especially when we know that something is changing in the near future. I agree we do need to have a discussion about what reserves should be in enterprise funds. It's not mandated by state law like the general fund is. We need to have that discussion. We need to set that policy. And that's absolutely something we should do. And once we have that discussion and set that policy, we should take a look at our rates and adjust them accordingly, including the projections over the next 3, 4, 5 years. I said before, I'll say again, I very much would like to see a 5-year rate plan for all of our enterprise funds. There's no reason why we can't look into the future, adjust that as it comes. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but there's no reason why we can't start looking at it. And I'll leave it at that. I'm in favor of leaving things as they are, at least until more information is brought forward that shows they should be different. Thanks.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to echo a little bit. You kind of stole my thunder, Councilman Jacobs, but I think we can solve a lot of this if we could put into place a 5-year plan, because we would know the expenses, which you've already discussed. We would know impact fees. We would know water rates. We'd know all the capital improvement projects that are coming up. And I think in all of these fee discussions, we need to be more proactive and more planning and less reaction. And so that's really all I'm going to just say on this. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. So the further the conversation goes, the more I'm beginning to recall. I'm remembering some conversations we had about the needs with the water treatment plant to help remove the phosphates. The number for that was all across the board. I can't remember, it was like 12 million for the total project, or if it was going to be higher or lower, if they were going to bond for it, or if we were going to have to pay cash all at once. If I recall, some of those questions had not been answered, so the approach taken was let's start putting money aside so we can cover that when that hits. The point in bringing that up is because if I recall right, there were a lot of moving pieces, and we didn't really have any firm understanding on any of them, which is why what was going through my mind, but not reflected in my vote, was we really need to review this when it comes up in June. The other thought, going to the idea about being, did that cut out for a second? Oh. The other thought. Luckily, we don't need to stop for a motion to continue.
No, that's no longer required.
But where was I?
Sorry.
Yeah, being fiscally responsible and setting aside money for anticipated, relatively certain expenses. I don't know that that is the fiscally responsible thing to do here, because the city budget is not the same as my personal budget. I don't know if it's the right thing to do to say, yeah, we anticipate we're going to have X amount of expenses 5 years from now, so let's start collecting now for what we anticipate down the road, because I don't know that it's fair to charge people today who may not be living here tomorrow. This is one of those places where not all debt is bad debt. If we were to do an improvement to the sewer that has a 20-year life, rather than saving for 5-10 years in advance and charging everybody now, the people who are benefiting from it should be the people who are paying for it. So I would see that as an appropriate use of debt and a good time to bond, so that you can allocate the cost for the service on to the folks who are benefiting from the service. If we're charging too much now, we're essentially making folks pay for today something that they may not be here tomorrow to appreciate, and I don't know that that's the responsible thing to do. Again, I'm going to go back to the idea of the most responsible thing to do is make sure we have information before we make a decision. That didn't happen with the vote that passed in November 2016, and I don't feel like that's going to happen tonight either. So I don't want to take any action tonight, but I do kind of want to plant that seed in the minds of staff as they're preparing for when this does come back, assuming it doesn't happen tonight. That's kind of what I'm looking at. I think it would probably, I'd like to know actual numbers of what's required for us to pay for sewer system improvements, and I'd prefer the route of bonding. This, from a philosophical perspective, seems like the appropriate time and place to bond, so you can allocate the cost for the service across those who are going to be benefiting from the service, rather than front-loading those who may not necessarily benefit. Thank you for the floor, Mayor.
You couldn't have stated it better than what you just stated. That's why I move that we remove the July 1st, 2017 second phase of the sewer fee increase, or direct staff to remove it immediately.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Rolfe, second by Councilmember Burton. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. Just briefly, I won't support the motion purely because I want all the information. You cannot make an information just on a balance alone. You got to know the income stream, the expense stream, what's coming up. I think one meeting is not too much to ask staff to prepare a picture for us of what they've got planned.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I could be supportive of the motion if it were slated to take that action at our next council meeting when we have the financial information to back that from staff. I'm not quite ready to support that right now without having a firm grasp of what impact that would have. Thank you.
Let's vote.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Jacob?
No.
Councilmember McConaughey?
No.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
No.
Councilmember Newton?
No.
Councilmember Nichols?
No.
Mayor Ralph?
Yes.
The vote fails 2-5.
I move to table item 8G. Some of us received some information late today from staff, and I don't think the information is totally accurate, and so I'd like to move that to December 20th for discussion then. That's my motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Rolfe, second by Councilmember Newton. Discussion of the motion. Let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Nichols?
I was just ready to vote. Yes, we can wait.
Councilmember Newton?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Mayor Rolfe?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
Councilmember Nichols.
Thank you. I somehow hit that twice. I would just like to make a motion as it's already on the agenda, but we don't even need to, but I would just direct staff to put on the agenda next week to discuss sewer rates, and I would really like to see our capital improvement plan, how that fits in with impact fees, our current balance, so that we can make an educated decision.
Yes, sir. That is reasonable request.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got something for the remarks portion of the meeting, so if we're there, I'll go up. Otherwise, I'll hold tight.
Actually, I think we have a motion to move to a closed session, so that would be appropriate right now. Any remarks?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. With the winter season coming on, snow very much likely, we constantly get complaints about streets not being plowed. Having gone on a couple ride-alongs with our streets department, often the reason for streets not being plowed is too many vehicles parked on the street. I know historically we haven't done much as far as ticketing of those vehicles goes. I wanted to see if there was a desire from staff or from council to give direction to staff to take a more proactive approach to street parking during the winter months this year. I don't necessarily mean by issuing tickets, but perhaps warnings on vehicles that are parked on the street prior to storms coming, or something of that nature, so we can encourage people off the streets. I wanted to see if there would be support for that sort of action.
I think that's asking a lot of our police department. Is there somebody else who could put those warnings on there so that our police don't have to do that?
I would ask Mr. Shepard if that's something police have resources to do, or if perhaps community service officers, or perhaps code enforcement, if it's not an actual ticket, if it's just a flyer going on cars. But I would look over to him.
We, every year we do work with the streets department in basically setting up areas that we perceive or know that there's known problems. And we do try to target those areas as much as we possibly can prior to an actual event. And of course, manpower needs are factor into that, but it is something that is currently being coordinated.
I want to be sensitive to the idea that I know that our police are heavily, they don't have much discretionary time during the storms. So that's why I'm hoping to do something proactively in advance, and maybe perhaps with the new police department Facebook page, even going out and saying, hey, we're going to be issuing warnings to vehicles parked on the street, even if that warning is just a little slip of paper, whether it comes from police or streets or somebody. If we can try and get the word out through multiple methods, flyers on cars, Facebook, Twitter, just so that we can help kind of make people aware that they really shouldn't be parking on the streets. I'm hoping that that's helpful for snow removal. Thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
I move that we move into closed session to continue our discussions of the things listed earlier this evening.
Back to closed session.
And adjourn from there.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Burton, second by Councilmember Newton. Discussion of the motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be in opposition. That's all.
Let's vote.
Councilmember Newton.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
No.
Councilmember Jacob.
No.
Councilmember Nichols.
Nope.
Mayor Rolfe.
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Yes.
The vote passes 4-3 in favor.
Melanie, does a closed session not need a 2/3 vote? I believe you need a 2/3 vote to go to closed session. Just a point of order.
Does a closed session require a majority vote, 55 votes?
2/3.
2/3 is 55. Majority. I was never, I don't believe the rule does that.
I believe state law.
Councilman Jacob, may we clarify what it is that you're concerned about? Is this a continuing or a new motion?
That's an excellent point. To continue, I don't know. I could.
Continue the closed session.
Yeah, I believe the motion to convene a closed session, now this can be up to you to decide, to convene a closed session in 54, or 52-4 in the Open Public Meetings Act requires a 2/3 vote. However, we already had a vote to convene the closed session, so if we're reconvening, I don't know. That's a good question.
What I wondered, I didn't pay attention as you ended your, when you came in here at 6 and started, I didn't hear a motion or an indication that you were continuing.
Oh, that's because you weren't in that part of that meeting as we finished in there.
Oh, you want to finish?
As we left that room, whether we were finished or not, that's a good question.
And clearly I was not in the room, so I can't tell you what happened.
Oh.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. When we were getting ready to leave that room, I requested that we adjourn and return after this, so I did make that statement before we left. And Mr. Dodds can confirm.
That is correct. That did happen. My advice would be, as far as the motion to reconvene back in closed session, I think since the state law does require for a 2/3 vote for that to take place, I think that should also be required as well to reconvene. If we don't have the 2/3 vote, I don't think legally it'd be appropriate to reconvene in closed session.
Move to adjourn. All in favor?